Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delilah Lugo.
I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
And Jason, what game are we talking about today?
Jedi Survivor of the
Whoa.
Fallen
Wars
Order.
Jedi.
Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Yeah.
Man, right off the bat, botching the title of the game.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, so Reap the Spoils is a monthly spoiler cast where we pick a game, we play that game, and then we come and talk about it for a long time and put that discussion out there for you to listen to. It is a spoiler cast. That means we're going to spoil the game. If you have not played the game that we're talking about, I highly suggest you pause the episode, go play that game, and then come back to the episode and listen to us talk about it, because I don't want to ruin that first experience. I don't want us to be your first impression of the thing we're talking about.
Yes.
So if you haven't played Star Wars Jedi Survivor, I recommend pausing and playing that and then coming back. If you can play it. I mean, if you're gonna play it on PC, well, I hate to break it to you, but it's like still kind of a mess. I think it's definitely still buggy on consoles too.
Yeah.
And we'll go into that a little bit because
this game is the definition of jank. We'll get to it though.
It came out. It definitely came out pretty hot. It I don't. If you have not gotten around to this game yet, I don't really blame you. It was probably a good idea to wait. Unfortunately, we couldn't because we wanted to make this episode, and we had this scheduled for months.
Yes.
But yeah, I have a brief history lesson of Star Wars Jedi Survivor prepped and ready to go. Are we ready?
See.
Let's do it.
So, Star Wars Jedi Survivor is obviously a sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. If you have not listened to our episode on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, well, go listen to that. I listened to it again recently. It's an early episode. I sounded very subdued and quiet on that episode. I don't know what was up with me back then. I'm so full of energy nowadays, guys.
I also think in retrospect I was a little too hyped on that one. I think it was also contextually where I was with Star Wars, my personal relationship with one of my favorite IPs at the time.
Well, yeah, and for some context of when Fallen Order came out, that came out in November 2019, right around the same time that Rise of Skywalker was coming out.
The contrast was great with that one, yes.
Yeah, I think it's not controversial to say that was a particular low point for Star Wars.
And at this point, I've been through the 5 stages of grief with Star Wars, where I'm indifferent. It's how if you go on any of the major Star Wars, it's how it is. That's what everybody's saying. We've been through the 5 stages of grief. Indifference is kind of where the fandom's at this point.
Yeah.
5 stages: denial that J.J. Abrams is involved, the anger that J.J. Abrams is involved, bargaining with J.J. Abrams to not ruin Star Wars. Okay.
Not even just the movies, man, but that's a whole nother conversation that we don't need to get into. Yeah,
that could be a fun topic someday, but I digress.
Jedi. I'll write a book, Star Wars and Me.
We're having a Star Wars episode, and we reference Star Wars almost every episode. So now we can talk about Star Wars. It's gonna be a thing.
Well, I mostly reference Star Wars every episode just because
it is you.
It's like, and it's not just me. Like, you can look at any book on writing. Like, fucking Stephen King references Star Wars. Orson Scott Card. Like, every great writer references it just because it's so easy to use as an example.
Today we're going to talk about Doki Doki Literature Club. Now, in Star Wars.
Yeah.
So Jedi Fallen Order came out November 2019. It came to current gen consoles in 2021. Or just before Survivor came out, I replayed that game and just to have a good comparison point fresh in my memory, and we'll probably be making a lot of comparisons. Yeah, I guess that's another thing to lead off on. We're not just going to be spoiling Jedi Survivor. It's kind of hard to not spoil Fallen Order as well, since this is a direct sequel, so probably a good idea to have played Fallen Order as well. Both of those games were directed by Stig Asmussen of God of War fame. He directed God of War 3. He worked on the first two in other roles. I think he was the art director for 2. He had other roles with the God of War series back in the day, like pre-Norse mythology, when it was still still had a Greek setting. And another thing to note about Jedi Survivor, that this is the last game as part of the EA exclusive rights deal with the Star Wars IP. We are, so like to give a little context to that, we know other Star Wars games are coming from other publishers, but they haven't come out yet. This is the last one as part of the EA deal.
Huh. That's
So,
interesting considering the ending.
well, and to be clear, like that doesn't mean EA can't make Star Wars games. This is just the last one where they have the exclusive rights to the IP.
Right. Gotcha.
So this game, Survivor, it was announced at Star Wars Celebration last year in May. So it's been just over a year since this game was revealed, and the release date was announced at the Game Awards later last year in December. The original release date was supposed to be March 17th. In January, there was a delay announced where it would no longer be coming out in March. It was getting delayed 6 weeks to April 28th. Which is when it released for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC.
Could have used another delay.
Could have used another delay, and we'll talk about that shortly.
But would it have made a difference is the real question.
Well, you would hope.
I mean, in terms of glitches, but in other problems that I think we all
Well,
had.
I think as far as those problems I think you're alluding to, Jason, no, of course not. But I'm talking purely bug wise. Like, could it have used another delay?
Yeah.
Probably should have.
I agree. I'm just being an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the history lesson. This is your final warning. If you have not played Jedi Survivor, or if you haven't played Jedi Fallen Order, I highly recommend pausing the episode, going back and playing both of those games, particularly Survivor, because that's the one we're mostly going to be talking about today, and then coming back to this episode and listening to us spoil, talk, and in some regards, I think complain about it. Sorry if this, in advance, if this is a more negative episode. I feel like
I might be positive more than you.
I've been
Positive
really
things
down
to
on this
say.
game, guys.
It's because you're platinuming it.
No, like, okay, yeah, in a way, but I was feeling burnt out on this game just playing through the story because I just wasn't into it.
Yeah.
That's a spoiler warning. Sorry, we're about to start spoiling the game, so that's your last chance. Yeah, guys, I really did not like a lot of this game.
But tell us how you really feel.
Okay,
Safe space.
huh?
This is a safe space.
This I don't have like a long couch to lay back on and tell you how I feel.
It's like that scene from Anger Management. Tell us how you really feel, Dave. I don't know what the hell you want me to say. You just have Jack Nicholson's face over mine.
So I have Bode listed first, but I actually want to start off by talking about Dagon. Did you? I thought he was a total waste of time. What did you guys think of Dagon?
Who do you want to go first, Solella?
I'll just say, like, yeah, Jason's ready. I'll just say for Dagon, definitely him not being the main villain, I think shortchanged him, but I do like him in terms of what it means for the Jedi Order not being all good, and like there's an evil side, which has been explored in other Star Wars properties. Like that's why, like, other major Star Wars characters. I'm trying not to spoil other Star Wars properties, but that's why they
I'll
turned
go
against
ahead and
the
say
Jedi Order.
Delilah, if you're referring to the movies at all, I think it's safe to spoil like the surrounding IP, like especially as it pertains to the sequels and the prequels and the original trilogy.
Yeah.
If there's anything you want to say about those, I think it's fair game to spoil those movies.
It's more about like Ahsoka, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, like, there's characters that basically, go against the Jedi Order and they decide not to be a part of it anymore because they do bad shit. And I think Dagon was like a result of that behavior from like the Jedi Order. So that aspect of it is cool. But in terms of like his goal and his motivation, it's like, okay, like I get it. They took this thing away from you, this planet that could have helped the Jedi Order, and they were just like not with it, and now that's all you were consumed by, and now you mean nothing. And yeah.
Well, I think part of what bothers me so much is like first of all, it should be noted like Dagon's from not from our era as we know it of the Jedi Order, but from the High Republic.
Yeah.
He's from an older generation of Jedi, an older generation of the Republic, which is very different from the one that is portrayed in the prequels that eventually leads to a downfall at the hands of Palpatine. Dagon just feels like a side quest. It feels like a distraction, and he's not portrayed in any to me, he's not portrayed in any compelling or interesting way. He's just this villain immediately out the get-go. Like you're never given an opportunity to really get to know him, get to know what happened outside of some echo flashbacks that Cal can come across that just show basically like the Jedi Council of his time didn't believe in the usefulness of Tanalorr, didn't have much of an interest in it, and he couldn't convince them, and then it was attacked, and he felt betrayed by he felt betrayed by the Jedi, and his friend, like his really close friend Santari Khri, wouldn't stand with him, actually attacked him, is the reason he only has one arm, and kind of imprisoned him in a bacta tank, and that's where you wind up finding him. I feel like it would have been more interesting if he initially came out as an ally and was hiding his true intentions and using Cal and Cal's party. But no, he immediately pops out as an antagonist and is gone for a good chunk of the game.
I agree. And also they were trying to use him as like someone to mirror against Cal, like, oh, Cal can become him, and I just didn't feel like that was very effective.
No, not at all. And we'll talk about it more with I would say is the true villain of the game, Bode, but
I feel like this is a good place for me to interject. So I feel like my perception of Dagon might have been different from you guys because I called the twist in the introductory segment of the game.
Which twist?
Bode.
Okay.
I knew the entire time. As soon as he mentioned daughter, I knew that was what they were going for. It's just an easy writing trick. It's a writing trick that's been repeated so often.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, it's a trope, and we've talked about tropes, and you've gone on the record,
and it's
Jason,
not a bad thing.
Right, you've been on the record on the show saying tropes, they exist for a reason. They're not necessarily bad.
Like, Jason, I know you want to go in, but like before you go in too much, like my relationship with Star Wars right now is that it's in an oversaturated place. So the story of someone selling out to protect themselves or their family is just kind of like overused at this point, where it would have been effective in this game if I hadn't seen it a million times in Star Wars properties recently. You know what I mean? So my relationship with Star Wars, like Jason said, for his relationship with Star Wars during Jedi Fallen Order, affected me and that twist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally understand that.
Well,
but so basically from the beginning, I understood what Dagon's purpose was in terms of the writing, which Delilah already pointed out. He's the Jungian shadow. He's supposed to represent, because of the character arc that the main character Cal is going through, what Cal could become. It's you fight demons long enough, you become a demon yourself type of deal going on. And I thought for that purpose, Dagon could have been extremely useful. The problem is that, as both of you guys have pointed out, his motivations are completely unclear. The boiled down version that he had what he wanted taken away from him by the Order and felt betrayed, yes, that's clear. But we don't know why the Jedi Council did this. At least I didn't by the end of the game. Why didn't they go forward with Tanalorr when it seems so precious?
They didn't believe it would.
But but they seem so staunch about it. Was there something evil lurking there? We don't know. Tanalorr, by the way, it's spelled different, but the name is taken from the Elric saga. It's Michael Moorcock. It's the center of his multiverse. It's a neutral city, the Dreaming City. I just found that funny and amusing, and I thought I should insert it there.
What was the other episode where
which is why I thought Tanalorr would have more meaning than it ultimately did. But what was I going to say? But the point is that we don't really get a clear understanding other than he feels betrayed. We don't know the context for it really, other than he wanted to go to Tanalorr. We didn't understand Tanalorr's importance in the current day, and by current day I mean when the game is taking place. It makes sense. Yeah. It's shelter from the Empire. We have no idea what its context was at the time that Dagon was trying to get to it. We have no idea why the Jedi Council told them no. We have, I get, and they didn't flesh out Dagon enough, as Delilah said, to make him useful in the purpose he was supposed to serve as the Shadow. So we don't really, it doesn't work. I understand what they're trying to do, and I like that, and had they executed it well, I would have liked Dagon as a character. The problem is that he's not in it enough. We don't get enough fleshing out of him for him to really serve the purpose, as Delilah pointed out.
Yeah. I agree. It might be like broadly explained why he was so obsessed with Tanalorr. Like, I mean, it could have just been like some force contrivance of like it's a really strong place with the Force, but like it really isn't a good motivation for him. It's just kind of used to contrive this obsession that he has to then also have a mirror of Cal's obsession with taking down the Empire, which those two things they don't really match up as well as that the game wants them to.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we can transition more broadly to Bode, and I get the impression you, Jason, at the very least didn't care much for Bode as a character, as a villain.
No, actually, we'll get. I want to hear what you have to say first.
Okay, I really liked Bode. Yeah, sure. His antagonism kind of comes as an expected or an obvious twist that they try to pull off. And him having a daughter, you know, it's cliche. There's lots of tropes on top of that, but just his dynamic with Cal, still trying to play it off as like, at least it kind of seems on the surface, he cares about Cal, he likes Cal, but like at the end of the day, his family comes first, and that I think is a more effective parallel with Cal as a character. But those two characters, instead of the theme of obsession that they try to parallel with Dagon and Cal, the theme of surviving, of being survivors that they parallel with Bode and Cal, I think is much more effective. In how they both are survived the purge in their own separate ways, but they're both fighting for their own respective families. Bode's daughter in his case, and Cal in the case with Marin, Grease, and you know, at a certain point, Seer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jason. I want to hear your thoughts.
Or you want to hear my thoughts?
Yeah.
Bode was actually my favorite character in the entire game.
I agree.
Until
oh no.
So here's my problem, and it's a problem of execution because I loved the twist, even though I saw it coming from 100 miles away. I was down for it. It very much felt like a middle part of what clearly is being set up, I think, to be a trilogy. Feel, which is it's character focused.
Okay, yeah.
And it's, even though Tanalorr is presented as this haven that could potentially shield them from the Empire, the stakes still feel relatively small in scope compared to like the first game where they're trying to get the holocron that has every potential Jedi or whatever.
Yeah, if I can just echo a sentiment that we definitely brought up in the episode for Fallen Order, like the kind of the catch with this game that we'll probably talk about toward the end of this episode, or the catch with this game series is they can't do anything too substantial, right? Because it can't have any major ramifications
Well,
for future Star Wars canon.
tell that to Dave Filoni, but that's a whole nother
Well,
topic.
yeah.
But
All of a sudden, Cal is Obi-Wan's son.
yeah, tell that to Ahsoka Tano. But anyways, so what I was saying was the twist felt great when it happened, even though I saw it coming. I loved the character of Bode. He was my favorite character, probably because he was the most fleshed out of all the characters in this game. I felt like anyway. He felt very much like a Star Wars character should feel to me, even though he ends up being the bad guy. My problem comes, and as I said before we started, I love this story for the first 2/3, and then I didn't. The reason being was that everything that happens after the betrayal, I felt like the motivation wasn't there. So let me explain. So Bode betrays you, and the motivations are clear. He became a spy for the Empire to survive, to take care of his daughter. He found love outside the Jedi Order, which led him to question. Like, everything's fleshed out and is there and makes sense, and he works extremely well for a character. And up until he betrays you. And had the game ended on whatever the fuck the desert planet, Jeddah, had the game ended with the death of Seer and sets up that the next game is going to be you potentially pursuing Bode, I would have loved it. The problem is this whole pursuit to Tanalorr thing and the final showdown at Tanalorr and having him be the final boss fight. Just using what internal logic has been presented, right? It seems like Cal is looking to try to make not amends, but have Bode surrender or something. It seems like the conflict is he going to kill Bode or is he going to, try to make peace? And then in those final cutscenes leading up to the final boss battle with Bode, that seems like the decision Cal made is he stepped back from hate for a moment to try to resolve it peacefully, right? Why does Bode not accept that? If Tanalorr is apparently a shield from the Empire, and he's afraid the Empire will come after him and his daughter, why does he reject Cal and go to a boss fight?
Well, go ahead, Delilah.
No, I was just gonna say, I think the implication at that point is that he's so far into the darkness or whatever that he can't even see clearly. Like, he was even like murking his daughter. Like, she was literally like about to die and before Marin saved her because he force pushed her and then broke the freaking bridge and shit like that. So I guess that was the implication.
I get that's the implication. It's just not set up nearly as well as the twist was.
Okay,
and just doesn't make sense given his established motivations.
So here's the thing, right? I bring up two themes, right? The theme of Survivor, which is the namesake of the game, and the theme of obsession. And Bode is not immune to that. He has an obsession too, and that's escaping the Empire. Because he's been working for them undercover. He's kind of been under their foot this whole time, and he wants out. He wants out for his daughter. He wants out for himself. He is desperate, and there's a key turning point in his friendship with Cal, in his perception of Cal, and that's when Cal tells him Tanalorr could be a good place to raise an army, and that involves bringing through the what's the hidden path, bringing them to Tanalorr for safe passage. The hidden path is that group. It was introduced in Obi-Wan.
Yeah, they're the Jedins. Yeah, they're
in general, they're just people that they're hiding from the Empire. I think Force sensitives amongst others, hiding them from the Empire and giving them safe passage to safe places out of the Empire's reach. The idea was that Cal had was to get them there, but also raise an army that he could then take back to the Empire. And Bode saw that as a direct conflict with what he wanted Tanalorr to be, which is, we go there and just us and no one finds us, and that's the end of that. He doesn't like the idea of more parties getting involved. It makes things too complicated, too many hands in the pot. And from understanding that, I get his perspective, but I do kind of understand how it in the end, him kind of completely being unwilling to negotiate or unwilling to resolve it peacefully with Cal, it wasn't particularly well executed. I think everything with Bode up till that point was great, and then it was at that point where he was completely unwilling to compromise. That
Yes.
was the problem.
Yes.
I think him luring Cal to the ISB base in Nova Garen was brilliant. I think him using Cal to take down that base, which was kind of Bode's own personal prison for what, the better part of a decade. Fantastic. I think that was very, very smart, and it also leads into another key plot device that I want to talk about momentarily, which is Cal's kind of descent toward the dark side. That's a huge motivator in progressing that plot. But my proposed fix for the ending with Bode would be that Bode does back down, says that him and Kata are gonna hide on the planet. Cal can do whatever he wants. Him and his group can do whatever they want as long as they leave them out of it. And then we don't see Bode for a while into the third game, where he kind of would ideally redeem himself. Obviously none of this is going to happen because Bode dies at the end of Survivor.
Right.
Like completely just flat out dies, and he's given a funeral, a Jedi funeral, along with Seer, who we'll talk about shortly as well. That's my proposed fix to the whole ending with Bode. I don't want to complain about what the game isn't, but for such a good character with such well-rounded motivations and just a complete, rug pull from under the audience, under the player, of you think he's your ally, but he's just been using you this whole time. It really was a shame for him to just not compromise at the end, and to just put everything on the line like that. And not try to, and really, like, it does call into question. After you beat the game, you can go back around, and while exploring, you'll find new force echoes that aren't marked on the map, that are conversations Bode has in secret. And honestly, they raise the question, for me at least, of, did he really ever view Cal as a friend? It kind of seems that way. It kind of doesn't seem that way. But I think it's up to interpretation. I like to believe that he did, but he was caught between Cal as a friend and needing to protect his own family,
Yeah.
He saw him as a friend because he was trying to convince him not to go through with the mission. He was like, "Oh, well, why don't you just like chill back and live a good life with Marin and not do
Right.
this?"
It's
So it's like he
it's
didn't
just
want to go against him.
some of those force echoes kind of call that relationship into question, though. Like, since they're just force echoes, they're just conversations. You don't actually have any visual. You kind of, some of them, you're left wondering, like, is he putting on an act and talking to the Empire, or is he talking to himself and being sincere? It kind of gets a little murky,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
adds to the mystery of his character, in my
I
opinion.
guess aside from the fact that I didn't think that the way his story ends worked well with the way he was characterized, including the way he used you to take down that ISP base, like you said, the way he was characterized as a more nuanced and well thought out person, and then suddenly that snap. Leaving that aside, I also think that you could have even had a Bode boss fight, but it doesn't end with him dying. It ends with Cal being able to convince him to resolve it peacefully.
That's
would
what
have
I'm
been
saying.
that would have been more resonant with the themes and what the game is going for than the way it did end.
Yeah, I think that boss fight, right. Have a final boss fight that's tough, challenging, whatever. Don't end with him dying, though. End with him saying, "Okay, you've beaten me. Fine, you win. You can have Tanalor. We'll share Tanalor, but I want nothing to do with what you're doing. I'm gonna go find my corner and I'm gonna sit in it, and you are not gonna bother
Yeah.
me." And
So
then
actually, I think we agree. I think we actually ended up agreeing a lot more than because I thought you didn't
yeah.
like the twist. I thought you were implying
No,
that you didn't
no.
like the twist. Yeah.
I really liked the twist. I feel like there should have, frankly, I think this whole narrative would have been so much better if we knew there was a spy, right? If we knew like somehow the Empire was finding out about what we were doing and we had no idea how, rather
It's
than
implied
have
in it's kind of implied in dialogue where they say, how are they tracking? They repeat it over and
yeah,
over.
Yeah.
How are they tracking us? How do they know we're here?
yeah.
But
It's
I
just
get what you're saying. Yeah.
instead we just go on this MacGuffin quest trying to find compasses to reach this mystical location that Dagon in the past wanted for God only knows why. And we go chasing after this other villain that just feels like a side quest. It doesn't feel like like it's important at all, except to again get a compass to get there. It's just there's a lot
Yeah.
of wasted and you know this is one of the first like I would say big Star Wars properties that's utilizing High Republic stuff,
Yeah.
and it just feels wasted. Like there's not really a point to having it other than to set up Tanalorr, and Tanalorr didn't have to be like something rooted in High Republic history. Like
Yeah.
they could have just I don't know found it, or they could have
An
found it in some
uncharted
arc.
planet.
Yeah, like it could have just been an Uncharted, right? But or they could have just found it in the archives and built a story from there. But they decided to have like a lot of direct ramifications in the plot that just feel like we're meandering for half the game, over half the game, really.
Yeah. And like I agree with you guys. I definitely liked Bode. I was not surprised at the twist of him kind of selling out to protect his family, but at the same time, I had no idea that he was a Jedi, and I thought that reveal was really really cool.
Yeah. And also something I originally had a complaint about him having a red lightsaber. That's not his lightsaber. He just kept Dagon's after you defeat Dagon.
Mm.
To make that
Um,
connection.
Yeah, I was originally really annoyed about him having a red lightsaber because it's like I mean I don't think I don't think he's necessarily bad, right? Like Bode's not necessarily a bad guy. He's just looking out for his own. I think sometimes Star Wars gets a little
Well,
caught up in like, oh, if you're bad, you have to have a red lightsaber. I don't
so
agree with that.
again, I don't know how much of this still stands in the new canon, if you want the Disney canon, if you want to call it that. But
Yeah.
you could have a red lightsaber was not. It did not used to necessarily mean that you were a bad character. Like you, if I remember correctly, because you had like characters like Mara Jade and whatnot. It didn't correlate necessarily in the same way. I mean, obviously, in the original three movies, yes, that was kind of the idea. But in the old EU, I believe that Jedi's had red lightsabers, and there was like lore about choosing the color of your kyber crystal projection or whatever. But I don't know how much that still
But
is
like
relevant.
that's the thing is like nowadays I don't I would say this was even pre Disney era, but like definitely during the Disney era, red always equals bad. If you have a
Yeah.
red lightsaber, you are a bad guy. And I
Like I
think
like Seer speaks to that because she had a red lightsaber in the last game, and she wasn't bad. She had just given into the dark side prior to the
well
story that was told in the last game.
that lightsaber was only that was the Ninth Sister's lightsaber. It was definitely one of the Inquisitor's lightsabers. She only
Mhm.
had that temporarily.
Mm.
And then
The
she eventually
helicopter,
recovers her own.
the
Oh
helicopter
no,
sabers.
she gives Cal her lightsaber to go to use the parts to build his own.
Hmm.
And she uses an Inquisitor one for the remainder of that game.
Mm.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, again, it's a complaint that's kind of moot because I came to find out after the fact Bode just kept Dagon's lightsaber after they defeated him. Um, so it's a shame that he never recovered and used his own. I think it would have been better for him to have used his own and have a color that's not red to kind of signify a little better to the audience that you know there's no black and white necessarily in that situation. It's very morally gray, and there's a conversation to be had, like the conversation we're having now. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I do want to talk about, though, speaking of the dark side, I do want to talk about Cal's kind of descent into the dark side. How did you guys feel about kind of that portrayal of this character?
mean,
or go ahead, Delilah.
no, I was just gonna say, like, just Cal as a character, I feel like he's really nothing without everyone else, like Grease, Marin, Seer.
Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of one of the underlying themes is the theme of family.
yeah,
And that he needs his family. And that's something that actually the time jump between the last game and this one, it's kind of weird. Like it leaves a lot up to interpretation, and then says vaguely why they split up, but it's kind of weird.
It should be noted there is a prequel novel to this. I don't think it
oh my
explains or goes
god,
into why they split up as a party. Yeah, I know. I didn't read it. Don't worry.
fucking shit.
um, yeah, there was a prequel novel. I think it's called like Star Wars Jedi Battle Scars or something. I don't think it's important, and I don't think it explains why the party broke up or who the people that Cal starts with are. Not that they matter much because they die within the hour, except for Bode.
Yeah,
And I kind of feel like the opening didn't really work well for me. Just because like I had these expectations of like, oh, who are these people that are clearly in on the fact that Cal is captured? Like, obviously this is a ploy. Um, there's no way that he's actually captured and being turned over to the Empire. And oh yeah, and surprise, he's not actually captured and being turned over to the Empire. But like was looking at these folks like there's like that can't be Grease, right? Because like they're too tall and don't have four arms.
Hmm.
Um, and shortly in you find out that the party, as it were, broke up. But I had no attachment to these people because I didn't know who they were, and I was like just learning
yeah,
what their names were within that first hour, and then they're dead by the end anyway. The end of that first hour, not even by the end of the game, the end of the first hour. So it just like I don't know, they kind of expected that to be, I guess, a more emotionally driven moment, and I feel like Cal doesn't even get to take a lot of time to mourn them, so why would I?
yeah. No, it wasn't emotional at all for me. But
Um,
I mean, speaking of that opening scene, at least Coruscant looked cool. Although I feel
Hmm.
like Coruscant is becoming the new what's that desert planet?
how could you forget Tatooine,
I
the
know
most
Tatooine. I was gonna
reused
say
planet in
because
Star Wars?
we were talking about Tanalorr, and I was
Oh,
Tanalorr,
okay,
stupid
okay.
names. Yeah, I was about to say Tanalorr, but yeah, it's becoming the new Tatooine.
Why? Just
It's
because
been
Andor had a bunch of scenes on
Andor, a
Coruscant?
Bad Batch had a lot of Coruscant.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's becoming more prominent, like
Yeah,
Tatooine.
I just feel like it would have helped, um, because ultimately what they're trying to do with Cal, I do like a lot, and it mirrors the original trilogy, and that's not a bad thing. Um, but I feel because it's implied through dialogue that a lot of the impetus for him going headfirst into the rebellion, aside from his own personal reasons in history, is that he feels like Seer left the fight or abandoned the fight, and that pissed him off. It would have really helped to have flashbacks about them breaking up to help that out,
Yeah,
especially considering, and we'll get to it, how underutilized I feel Seer was here.
for
She's
sure.
barely in the game. Um,
And like,
Again, it's a thing. This is like the running theme with this game's story and writing is that everything's there, and I see what they're trying to do, and it could have been amazing, but they flopped on the execution.
I we do get some flashbacks with Seer, but they're just like the same things like they did in Fallen Order, where they're just like innocuous parallels of situations that lead back to
Yes,
like training for Cal to remember, oh yeah, I can do this with the Force.
it's not the emotional scene that we needed between Seer and Cal that
Yeah,
shows why he was resentful of her, which is implied to have driven him full on stop into the Saw Gerrera camp, which Saw Gerrera, Disney character, we know very little about him other than Save the Dream from Rogue One. Um, but apparently he's like a founder of the rebellion, which okay.
No, he's not a founder of the
He's,
rebellion.
but what would eventually become the rebellion? It's
Yeah,
like
I mean,
implied. Yeah.
yeah. The whole thing with, I mean, not to dig too deep with other Star Wars things, but like the whole thing with Saw Gerrera versus and his forces versus
He's
the
very militant. Yes.
yes, he's much more militant. He's much more brash. He's much more violent. Um,
Yeah,
But
he
like
gets the job done.
yeah, but a big part of
yeah,
Cal's development in this story is when he discovers what Seer has been doing and kind of realizes how brash he was to judge her, which like again, we needed to see what that original argument between them was
yeah.
and what drove him into this militant faction of the proto rebellion, and we don't get it.
Yeah.
So like his arc kind of is hindered, I feel, by that.
Well, I wouldn't say just that, but like to talk more about the events that kind of lead him to going down a darker path is like throughout the game, he'll kill someone in a fight, and this starts right at the beginning on Coruscant when the night we find out the ninth sister's alive, and until she's not 5 minutes later. But he kills the ninth sister, and then when he meets back up with the party, they're like, "Oh, what happened to her?" He's like, "She's gone," and he seems kind of remorseful about it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's supposed to mean something.
Well, in the
And
first
that
game, wasn't it implied that he knew her from the Jedi Academy?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I maybe I'm misremembering that, but I don't think so. But that's not even the only instance. Like he feels remorse. They try to set up every time he kills a major player that he feels remorseful about it. When I think they did the same thing with Ravis, and then they did the same thing with Dagon. And
Yeah.
the thing is, those deaths happen long after the ninth sister, so they set that up at the very beginning of the game, and then they forget about it for the following 10 to 15 hours, and then it comes back up, and then all of a sudden he's tapping into a very dark part of him when he's betrayed by Bode, and it just feels like there's not really an effective build up to that descent.
Exactly.
I like the idea of him kind of descending. I like the idea of him tapping into that because it plays into that survivor theme. It plays into the theme that he's just trying to get by and fight back. And there is no Jedi Order. This is kind of a thing that bothers again, but to complain about other current Disney canonical things. This is something that kind of bothers me about minor spoilers for, well, I mean, it's several years older at this point. Minor spoilers about Luke in Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, where he's like really trying to reestablish the Jedi Order and is trying to keep their rules around. It's like, well, dude, that stuff is gone, and you didn't succeed with that sort of thing. You didn't succeed with the whole no attachments thing. Um, Cal is like, he has no reason to abide by that stuff anymore, right? The Jedi Order's gone. So if you got to use the dark side to get by, do it. I just think it's really poorly handled in that it's introduced at the beginning and then nothing happens for a long time, and then it's just reintroduced unceremoniously toward the end in a really cool way, but it just there's no effective build up toward it.
Mm-hmm. No, I
Outside of
completely,
Bode betraying him being the inciting incident to
I
really tap
completely,
in.
I completely agree. You needed more time between him and Seer, and you needed more time with him and Marin, which also would have tapped into one of the themes they're going for: family bringing you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think if we want to talk about Marin, I think their chemistry was great in
Mm-hmm.
this game.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And if there was anyone that was going to be able to talk him down in the event on the ISB base when he almost killed um Davik, I think his name was, it was going to be Marin.
Yeah.
Um so
Yeah, I like how they were like all cutesy in the beginning when they were on that like weird creepy creature on the Jeddah, and
Mhm.
like there was like that subtle movement where he like helped her up on the creature, and they like looked at each other all slowly. I thought that was like really nicely done. And then like a badass, you go through like one of the coolest parts in this game, which is going through these like
The
green hoops
coolest
where she's
part,
like
yeah.
teleporting
I
you
was
This
about
is
to bring
everywhere.
that up.
this is
Yeah.
where, and we'll get to it more in gameplay later, but this is where I was wishing the game was just like an Uncharted style action, linear game where you just have set pieces like that.
And when it taps into that stuff, it really works.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that whole moment was like an Uncharted asset piece, and it was awesome. It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
It was the best part of the game, including, the kiss part. Like you said, their chemistry was great, and it had setup. You had flashbacks, optional stuff you could look at. You had flashbacks to when they were younger and awkward towards each other, but very clearly there was a connection there. They have very similar backgrounds, although obviously she was one of the Night Sisters, but similar backgrounds,
In
very
that their
different.
kind was wiped out. Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
there definitely is a big parallel between the two of them.
but they're obviously polar opposite attitudes, which works nicely to pair them together. Very well set up. She needed more time in the game, though. We
I
get
would
the most time of all the characters from the first game. We get the most time with Grease, who has no real function in this story.
He's the
Yeah,
dad.
yeah.
He's the dad that cooks.
And any scene with Grease is wonderful. It's like I don't want to
Yeah,
downplay Grease. I
yeah.
agree with you that he has absolutely no bearing or place in the story,
Yeah,
but
he's
I
retiring. He
but I
doesn't
would
want
still not get rid of him. I would still always
No,
keep
no,
him
no.
around
Yeah,
because
yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm just
as
saying,
far yeah. No, I know.
yeah.
Like he's part of that he's a major part of that family that Cal is fighting so hard to protect. So it's important to still have have him as a presence, even if he doesn't affect the story in many ways.
And I feel
Um,
like overall they're just really trying to rush him like turning into the dark side. And I think that's why they killed off Bode because they want to tell this story with his kid and like how like Cal and Marin having to raise her as like their own is going to affect how he navigates the world. And I just felt like it was a little bit too rushed to the point where when Seer died, I didn't cry like I thought I would if you would have told me Seer was dying
yeah.
because I just didn't feel like we had enough of her and him in this game. Like I knew what their relationship was in the first game, but it didn't affect anything for this game. So when she died, I was just like, damn, that sucks. Like she was
There
a really cool character, but I
and
didn't feel that emotional
Well,
pull.
there's
yeah.
another reason I want to get into why I feel Sears death was kind of undercut, but the before we talk about that, I do want to bring up like kind of the inorganicness of Kata as a character,
Mhm.
where her father, like her
You
father
just
was
you just murked
manic,
her dad. Yes.
yeah, and yet she's just totally fine.
Again, that's another part of why I hated that ending so much.
Yeah, and like I guess I to an extent I understand that like he wasn't really around because he was so busy like trying to carve a path for them to escape. So like maybe she just felt like she didn't really have a father anymore, or he because he was never around. Maybe they're playing it off as like she didn't have as much of an attachment to him as she could have had he just been more of a presence in her life. But
And yeah,
it's still the loss of your dad, and she seemed attached to him in the moment.
and
So,
she represents a lost opportunity for the overall. Again, assuming that this is going to be a trilogy, which it is. So I
mhm.
guess good place to put in that my hope. I'm glad that's her dad. I wish we got more time with her, but for me, and this is another problem I have. I'll mention Dave Filoni again. The more Jedi characters that are still alive in this time period, the more the weight of the original trilogy is undercut. It's one of the things I don't like
Yeah,
about all the shit that Dave Filoni does, especially with Ahsoka. Um, but so I'm glad that Seer died, and my hope is that by the end, Cal will die as well.
we'll talk about
At the
that
end,
at the
yes.
end of the episode because I
But this,
definitely want to present
but
some predictions.
I mentioned earlier about a peaceful resolution being more resonant to the themes of the story with Bode, and with now that you bring up Kata, I would have loved if Bode had been open to amicably resolving it, and Cal killed him anyway and went full dark side, and that's how the game ends.
Ooh, man.
And then the third game is Cal going full into revenge and Marin bringing him back. and Kata wanting to kill. Like that would have set up so perfectly. And by the end, Cal would die, but he ultimately is able to be brought back to some degree. Like I don't know. I'm sorry. Like
you wanted them to pull.
I'm going off on a tangent, but like you get what I'm saying. There were so many ways that this could have been the perfect ending, and it just wasn't.
And again, I don't want to complain too much about what this game isn't, but I do think there were better ways to navigate that ending and have it be just a little more tolerable to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
I just think Kata is such a strange child to just I don't, and like you could go on the ship and go around to other planets to do cleanup and stuff. Like she's a cheery little kid and is like calling Grease Uncle Grease. It's like, oh, what are you making for dinner tonight? It's like your dad just died. What is wrong with you?
I know.
Totally.
And
I feel like
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I would be really disappointed if in the third game they try and mark her up as being like that angsty teenager that becomes Cal's Padawan and she winds up like turning on him because then she remembers that he's the one that killed her dad and that's why she doesn't have family. And I just hope it just doesn't go that direction because then it would feel very, very weird in transition.
Yeah. Because we're going from a post game where she's like a cheery, happy child to a you killed my dad.
Right.
Well, that's the thing, right?
I'd never forgive you.
I have a feeling this writing team was hindered by that kind of open world post game design they were going for, because you couldn't do any of the things we just talked about that would have been better with the way the game is designed for that post game content.
I mean, they could have just said like, "Oh, Kata's still mourning. She's locked herself up in a room on the Mantis," like, and you just don't see her for all the post game. Like, that's fine. Who cares? Or you could have just had her be like a little more subdued, not be as cheery, just like kind of be like, whatever. Or she's just kind of like, going through the motions.
I just can't like help but think of how cool of the twist. Like you thought the twist was going to be, or at least a lot of people called that the twist was going to be Bode. But what if the twist on top of that was that no, the protagonist does go to the dark side. He falls into vengeance, especially after Seer dies. That would have really been an awesome way to end that game. But
that could have been cool. That could have been cool. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways the game could have ended that would have been better or cooler than the way that it actually did end. But we're stuck with what we got.
I know. I'm like, it's frustrating because as I said before, and I'll say again, the game has the structure of the story. All the bones are there for something amazing in the Star Wars universe that we haven't gotten in a really long time, and it just got flopped in the execution in almost every way. With some really stellar scenes standing out, like Delilah, you mentioned Marin and Al at that midpoint, that kiss, like really great scene. Like that is something I would expect from Star Wars.
Oh my god!
And there are other ones throughout the game, like we mentioned Seer. We already mentioned that she dies. I thought that was really well handled. I really liked that. I just wish there was more of her in the rest of the game. Like
yeah.
Before we move on, Delilah, what were you gonna say?
No,
what scene?
There was like another scene with Marin, and this was right before the twist when they were at the campfire, and like Marin and Cal like make out, and then all of a sudden the scene just quickly pans to him like meditating with the sun rising, like kind of implicating that they banged. It was like very subtle, but the transition was so quick that I was like, that was intentional.
Also,
I think there's some dialogue too that you can trigger that implies yes.
Okay. I rolled my eyes big time after they went through the what the hell is it? The Kobo Nebula or whatever. Wherever Tanalorr is hidden. It's like in like what the hell is it called? It's the Kobo something.
It's like a nebula or a cloud. I don't know.
Nebula or Kobo Abyss. It is a nebula, but it's called the Kobo Abyss. After they get through the abyss and like that really like nail biting scene or whatever, and the first thing Cal does is he makes out with Marin.
Yeah,
I like rolled my eyes. I was
that was the
God.
It was a cringy moment, but I guess it's honeymoon phase.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. Okay, we've been dancing around it a lot. Let's talk about Seer. Because I totally agree with what you're saying, Jason. Like she was definitely underutilized in this game. She needed to be around more. And I think her new design was great.
Oh yeah.
I think I was totally did not expect a section where you play as her. And
Yes.
I feel like you really got to feel
How
her
powerful she
power.
is.
Yeah, right. And she had her own move set. She had her own movement style, which was neat to see in a game that I feel where the combat is very repetitive and drab, and we'll get to that. But so it was cool to kind of mix things up a little bit playing as her. I think the Vader fight was terrible.
The fight itself, because I agree, gameplay design wise,
In
it
a
was
lot of
awful.
ways, it was very, very bad.
Yeah.
And if I may present why,
Okay.
um, forcing the player, forcing a Jedi that we know can't live, right? Like she's
Mhm.
fighting Darth Vader. She cannot live. She cannot survive that fight. She barely survived it in Fallen Order, and that's because they were in an underwater base and she made a wall collapse where water started rushing in. Like there wasn't really a fight there. This is a
No.
fight to force the player to basically defeat Vader. Like it implies Seer is almost matches his power, and that's a little ridiculous to me.
Yeah, and
And
there's only two characters in the Star Wars universe that have put
Well,
up a fight
look,
of
if
that caliber against
yeah,
him.
if we're gonna be fair, like we're in Filoni's world now, so Ahsoka
I
Tano fucking did it.
listen,
Yeah.
Ahsoka and
listen.
Obi-Wan, that's it.
Well, yeah.
I
Now
think if
Seer.
they were to make that fight more effective, you do like it's not just a boss that you fight and beat. It's Darth Vader. Like make it an impossible fight. Make it
Yes.
so that you just barely get him to half health or something, and that's the end. But
Yes.
they kept doing these like health bar like midpoints where you get him to a certain health. They have a cutscene that
Oh my
makes you
god.
think, oh, you've got an edge, and then no, he's still there, and then then you get him halfway, and there's another cutscene. This has got to be the end, right? No, you have to take his health bar down. Like why?
I felt like you dying and then respawning was like immersion
And you
breaking
have to
immediately.
go through all the cutscenes
And you
every
have
time.
and
Yeah.
exactly, and it's like again, it's Darth
Yeah,
Vader.
And that's
you knew she was
Cannot
gonna die.
I want to
right.
I want to emphasize that I don't have the same problems with this scene. I actually really it's one of my favorite scenes in the game, specifically because it wraps up
Seer's
and
story.
Seer's arc. Like
Mhm.
she comes to peace with all of her fears and regrets that she had in the first game.
Right.
Again, she wasn't in it enough to really emphasize those for this game. So if you didn't play the last game, it doesn't really have the impact. But
Right.
I liked it for that, and I did like that. You know, she does end up losing. Like you don't beat Darth Vader.
No, well, but
Yeah,
okay. I'm
yeah,
kind of mixing narrative, narrative discussion here with design discussion,
yeah.
and realistically,
The boss fight design is awful.
and
Yeah,
that's the problem I'm getting at, right? If, as far as design goes, forcing you to fight a villain that you know cannot be defeated at this point in the timeline definitely will not be defeated at this point in the timeline, and as a character that you know doesn't survive because there's no way she can in a situation like that, forcing the player, and again, purely design discussion, forcing the player to take that health bar from 100 to 0 makes zero sense. And if you really wanted to convey to the player the power of, because we all know Darth Vader, what Darth Vader's capable of. We all know his power, right?
mhm,
So if you really want we've all seen it. If you want us to feel it, make it an unwinnable fight.
I agree.
Don't make it a fight that you actually have to get him down.
Win to
And like,
die.
and it wasn't even, in my opinion, it wasn't really a fun fight. And that comes down to a lot of my problems with the combat of this
Yeah,
game, because I have a
it,
lot of issues with the combat of this game. But like a lot of the bosses have this problem where they have these attacks that aren't well telegraphed and are kind of bullshit. And there's
yes.
not really a feasible way to dodge or block them a lot of the times. And
It's
Vader has a
doing
ton of those.
Souls combat without the precision iframe so much that that makes the Souls combat work.
And frankly, I thought it worked. I thought it worked pretty well in the first game. I don't think it works well in this one, and we'll talk about
Nope.
that more when we talk about combat. But we can go into narrative discussion, I guess, more with Seer now. It's just design wise, I really thought that fight was botched, and making it something you actually
Yeah.
had to win, and also to wound him in the way that we did. It's like, again, it's Vader.
Well,
Why
it's
are you making Seer win this fight only to die, right after in a cutscene?
I mean, again, like I'll spoil Rebels. Who the fuck cares about Rebels? Ahsoka Tano does the same thing, where she brings down an entire fucking temple on Vader, and then the episode ends with him walking out. So it's like it's happened
Well, I
before.
mean,
He's basically a walking robot zombie. So
Obi-Wan Kenobi does the same thing too, and
Yeah, they're
I
the
mean,
only two.
I have a ton of problems with that show and how that portrays that
oh,
rivalry.
I didn't even fucking watch that show. I will
You
not. I
would
refuse.
hate it. Maybe we should do an
Well,
episode on it
no,
sometime.
fuck you. I will not, because
I'm
and I will argue this till the day I die. The greatest lightsaber fight in all of Star Wars is Obi-Wan and Vader in the original Star Wars. That is, it has everything that a lightsaber fight should have, and has so much emotional resonance. That show, just the show's existence, fucks it up.
that
But anyway, that's
show's
the show.
existence fucks a lot of things up, but again, maybe
I
a
won't. I
conversation for
won't
another
watch it.
time.
I don't know. I don't want to know.
Delilah, I think we need to outvote Jason and do an episode on Kenobi.
Actually like the show, so
Oh, yeah, see, even more reason to do an episode on it. But okay, back to Jedi Survivor.
yeah. I guess I just want to say, like, that scene, that entire scene with Seer, when you play as her, when you feel the power, that was all super badass. You can feel the difference in the controller of how much more powerful she is in comparison to Callan. That when you have that Vader fight, you just see the power difference. But I do think it was an immersion breaking to not just die. Like, I felt like once your health lost, if they wanted to have the 3 scenes where you see a little bit of burning on his mask and shit like that, on his like outfit, fine, no doubt you could do that, but like have her health regenerate or something like that, where she takes a stim or whatever the hell, and then have that ending sequence. You dying and having to fight over and over again, it didn't do anything for the fight.
It undercuts what was an amazing moment right before, where we get that completion of Seer's arc. She comes to terms and is at peace with all the things she regrets, and then immediately after, I fucking did like 20 tries and was frustrated beyond belief by the boss design. I agree with you, Mark.
Yeah.
It should have just been one shot you get, and you die no matter what you do.
Make you take down a quarter of his health, and then he says, "Oh, I'm not doing this," and then defeats Seer. Like you should not have had to take his health from 100 to 0. It just makes no sense to have to do that to Vader. That is ridiculous.
And the whole entire sequence was it flowed so well until the moment where you die. Now, if you died to Vader without dying to him, period, let's say you played on easy, or you're just a badass and you could just beat it your first try, then that would have flowed a lot better because you're not like restarting. But if you die, which you're probably gonna, because the boss fight is designed for you to kind of die, because he'll one-shot you with like a rock that he throws from the air, forces.
Yeah, I was playing on normal. It was worse than the Rancor fight. I was playing on normal. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, I played half of the game on Grandmaster, and I'm glad that for that fight I didn't, because I was rushing so that I can play Zelda.
I'm gonna be real with you guys. I didn't think the Rancor was that bad.
It was bad on Grandmaster. But
well, and I was playing. Yeah, I was playing on master difficulty. I played through master difficulty on the entire game. I didn't. I kind of thought about dropping it down. I let my pride get in the way and was like, no, I'm doing this on master difficulty. But Grandmaster, fuck that. No, that's too frustrating for me.
It's not even about, like, because eventually you do it enough for both the Vader and the Rancor fight. You do it enough, and eventually it's just not satisfying and not fun to play through, because mechanically and we'll talk about this in the gameplay section. It's just unfair.
I'll say right now, there are far worse fights than either of those.
Melania from and I think a lot of this also is informed by the fact that we just had not just had, but you know, we're Elden Ring is still fresh in a lot of our memories.
If
Melania was a more satisfying fight than any boss fight in this game.
Listeners, if you want to hear Jason talk more about the Elric saga, go listen to our Elden Ring episode.
Well, yeah, George R. R. Martin, he also puts stuff in his own books,
I
but
know. I just
he's good friends though with Michael Moorcock, so that's a
I
little
meant to
different.
bring it up earlier when you brought up Elric, and I was like, oh, what episode did we talk about that endlessly?
I bring
And
up Elric all
then
the time because Elric is probably one of the most influential IPs on modern fantasy and
it
sci-fi.
was the Elden Ring episode
It-
though, where you were like, Elric,
yeah,
Elric, Elric,
every
Elric.
Yeah.
every Bungie game has references to the Michael Moorcock multiverse, and in fact, there are fan theories that all Bungie games are meant to take place in his multiverse. Yeah, it's one of the most.
All right, all right, all
Yeah,
right. Back to Star Wars.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else to talk about with Seer? Like, I feel like we've said, as much as we can about her, which is kind of a testament to how underutilized she is in this game.
I think
Um,
like her death wasn't as impactful as it should have been,
mhm.
and the only time I felt impact was when she said her Padawan's name because it harkened back to her character development in the last game, and that
And
was it.
is that the only time that her Padawan's name was brought up? I can't even
Yes,
remember what her Padawan's name is.
Trilla.
Trilla, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh God. Yeah, I feel like that, and I feel like that was a bit of of an underutilization, is like not really not utilizing Seer enough, and not utilizing the arc that she went through in that first game. Um,
because her arc is, I would say, more interesting than Cal's at this point. You know.
Mm.
I don't
Well,
know if I don't know if I'd go that far, but I mean,
I would say that we needed more from her
yeah.
between, like I said earlier, flashbacks between her and Cal, why he got angry at her. Because when we meet Seer, it's basically Cal showing up like, "Oh, you didn't give up. You were just doing it differently. I see." And it's like there was a whole argument and resentment there that apparently informs his arc that we don't even know. It's just
Right.
like you meet Seer for the first time in this game, at least, and it's like, "Oh, you're helping Jedi. Oh, you didn't give up the fight. I thought you lost." And it's like, what the
This
fuck? What,
game
like,
really needed to do the Last of Us Part 2 thing, where it's intercut with a bunch of flashback sequences and stuff.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
I half mean that as a joke, but also I do
I know.
some.
You're trying to piss me off. I'm not falling for it.
I do think though that, like, yeah, definitely some flashback sequences more well utilized than, hey, remember that you can force lift, would have been
Yeah,
very welcome.
yeah. The way
Um,
they do the abilities in this game, I feel like is worse than it was in the original.
yes, very much so,
Um,
because it's
because
like,
it's like
at least,
if you could have done that the entire time just by remembering,
well, it's like in in Fallen Order, and now we're kind of digging into gameplay stuff. I do wanna talk a few more things about, like, characters and plot stuff. Um, I in the first game, it's established Cal cut off his connection from the Force, so he's forgotten everything, and like he gets into situations that remind him of his training. That makes sense. In this game, it's like he'll get into a situation where new force power is needed, and he'll remember a very, very tangentially related conversation he had with Seer. Not really like training related or anything. It's just like they have a talk about something that's like kind of related to the situation he's in, and then he remembers that he can force lift or force slam to the ground. Force slam, that's what it's called. Um
mhm.
why? That makes very little sense. I do like, last thing I'll say about gameplay related things before we go back to some story stuff. I do like that a lot of his upgrades are more mechanical
Mhm.
and not powers. It was a lot of praise has been heaped on the game for this. Pull
Metroidvania, you,
they
yeah,
don't pull a Samus. They don't strip you of your force powers and you have to relearn them. You start with everything that you had in the first game, and I think that is smart.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um but anyway, did you guys think did you guys expect Cordova to still be alive?
I
Mm.
honestly, when we met him, I was like, "Who is this guy?" And seriously,
Yeah, I mean I guess it's because I replayed the first one so recently that I definitely remembered him. But like, I don't know, in the first game, you only hear from Cordova through audio logs and holograms and stuff, and they're all past recordings. So it's like I had no reason to believe Cordova was still alive. So I was kind of like, oh, it's not like he does anything really. He doesn't do much throughout
Yeah,
the entire game,
and
except for fix the
they
compass and give it to you.
yeah, and they
And
kill him
then
off, which is good. One less Jedi
yeah,
in the universe.
right, exactly. But I feel like he was also underutilized, maybe just as much, if not a little more than Seer.
Yeah.
Just because he kind of was just there. You could have some idle conversations. I think he brings up he brings up something in conversation if you talk to him that was kind of like a nod to the greater Star Wars canon, but I can't remember what it was. No, it was something sort of surprising. Kind of like how in the first game, you can talk to Grease on the ship and he'll mention Yaddle for some ridiculous reason.
God.
It was like a deep cut reference, kind of like that. I just can't remember what it was.
I have
Uh,
nothing to say about Cordova.
yeah,
There's not really much to
exactly.
bring up.
He's a non-entity. He's a quest giver basically.
And
Yeah.
I would say the same about Santari Kree. Like she's pretty underutilized in what I think is a pretty terrible plot line, but it's like she's meant to be Dagon's friend, and all we really find out is that she winds up opposing him. Is the reason he only has one arm, and
Again,
she's
it's implied that they were
Yes.
potentially lovers, but like wouldn't go through with it because the
I
Jedi Order and that if they had fleshed that out more, as I said, this is all going back to what I said earlier about Dagon. Had they spent more time fleshing that out, it could have worked.
I wouldn't. I didn't get the feeling that they were like romantically involved or anything personally. I just
They were
felt
for
it
sure.
was okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think so, but
I think
it's
he called her like,
possible.
I don't know, some kind of pet word at some point.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Like my
I
my
think what they were.
love or I don't
Yeah,
know.
Oh, maybe I
I
missed that.
partner. I think because I think he uses the word partner multiple times. I think it's implied that he wanted to, and I think what the writers were going for was that it was more than just Tanalorr. It was her betrayal, which sent him off. But again,
Yeah.
they didn't flesh it out enough.
Yeah, right. And she's just like the disembodied voice you hear whenever you find a meditation chamber to solve the puzzle in. But like she's overall kind of a pointless character.
And again,
Um
if I remember correctly, she was the one that put him in the back to tank, right?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, she was. So
Yeah.
she felt remorse doing what she did.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'm sure she did, but like, whatever.
and
She's
I think in some of the temples that you can find with like the goop that apparently is a technology from Tanalorr,
Yeah.
which I thought they
yeah.
were going to use to try to explain why the Jedi Order didn't want to go there. But again, it kind of just becomes a game mechanic, and
Yeah.
that's really it. But
Um
you do find like echoes of her saying stuff. I think about
yeah,
still.
you find
Yeah,
like I said, she's like the disembodied voice that greets you when you walk
yeah.
into a meditation chamber, and yeah, I think you can find some echo. You also find echoes of like random Padawans and people training in those meditation
Yeah.
chambers.
But
I feel like it.
she hints at things like attachment and like grappling with it and remorse. So I think they definitely were trying to go through the love, like they were love and a love
Okay.
interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess this is something I didn't really pick up on, but I believe you guys. I
Again, had
totally
they
can see it.
fleshed it out, it could have been more clear.
Right, right. It would have been more obvious had they spent more time with that plot line. But again, I view that whole thing as a big distraction. And part of all that is Z, or as I like to call her, Dot Matrix, who is
Mm-mm.
pretty much useless and serves absolutely no purpose except for to
She's a
activate the
MacGuffin.
array.
Yeah. She's a
Yeah.
Yeah,
MacGuffin and an NPC at the open world hub.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that leads me to the last thing I kind of want to talk about is just the amount of NPCs in this game. Did you guys find any of them interesting?
I did. At first, I was like listening to all of their conversations, and some of them were kind of interesting, but then eventually I got so tired of it, especially because this game will put a conversation marker up even when the person has nothing of relevance to say, like, see you later.
Yeah.
And like, I
Yeah.
tried to exhaust all the dialogue because that's what the game encouraged you to do to pick up like side quests and stuff like that. And then I would go when I saw what white marker and the character would be like, not now. I'm like, okay, so why did you have a marker there?
Yeah. Again, as I mentioned earlier, like sacrificing to the overall design of the game, I have a feeling that a lot of the time that should have gone into fleshing out a lot of subplots in the main story went into writing all this shit for NPCs because some exec at the top wanted it to be have an open world element, but that's just speculation.
And I fully expect that to be doubled down on in the next sequel. I'm sure we'll get even bigger planets with even more things, useless things to find.
To not do,
Um,
which I didn't, yeah.
yeah, we'll talk more about that shortly. Um, my I fucking couldn't stand Scuva Stev. Um, yeah, I
Which
the
is this the fisherman? Oh,
fisherman. He was probably the one that was most talkative, and he was the one I found most insufferable.
I mean, I
They
only
did that
encountered
on
him twice.
purpose.
I unlocked him. I encountered him when you unlock him, and then at some point I came across him in the open world going somewhere, but I didn't really interact that much. I know he
Good.
has like a ridiculous like Scottish accent, right?
Yes, and he has this whole like plot line, like all based on like a past event. It's all based in the past that he'll tell you about in pieces and stuff if you talk to him. But it just takes forever, and he will endlessly talk to you, and it's not interesting, and it's hard to understand him because of his thick accent. Contrast that with the guy that I don't even remember his name, which says a lot about a lot of the NPCs in this game. um the guy that sits at the bar.
The blue
um
guy?
yeah, he was like kind of interesting
Yeah.
to talk to and kind of piece his story together, but like overall the NPCs, there's just so many of them and they're not interesting.
Yeah, I talked when it was just the game starting out, and there were just like one or two. I
Yeah.
talked with
Yeah.
them, but as soon as I came back and there were like 17 fucking people at the bar, all with dialogue, I was like, nah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It got
I'm out.
excessive.
I'm here for whatever upgrade or whatever I got to get from an NPC, and I'm peace out.
And then the only other one that I think is worth talking to, which is frankly the leads to the bit of side content that I think the only bit of side content that I think is worth engaging with, is Cage, the bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Um,
She's
the
cool. She had Cad Bane vibes.
Yeah, except she's very cheery and Australian. Which
True.
is not the impression I got when you first meet her, and she's just kind of in the corner in the bar saying, "Leave me alone, dude. I want to talk to you." And
Yeah.
then like a bounty hunter attacks you, you kill him, and she's like, "Hey, Cal, man, you really took down that bounty hunter." And it's like, what? This is not
Yeah.
what you were like when I last saw you. Why are you suddenly and Jason, did you watch the
Yes. Yes.
okay. So we could talk about that real quick. And the reason I think that that's the only bit of side content worth engaging with is because it actually has kind of a cool conclusion. And that's Cage was using you to take out all the other bounty hunters to raise up your bounty so that it would be worthwhile for her to go after you. You fight her, and then Boba Fett intervenes and is after Cage because she has a pretty good big bounty on her head. Um, and he winds up taking Cage in and not attacking you. Um, which I think is pretty cool because I feel like Boba Fett, he's relatively stoic I mean, completely stoic in the original trilogy. So I feel like it doesn't bring in too many implications, and he doesn't have anything. He has something against Mace Windu, obviously, but he doesn't have anything really against Cal, so I don't see much of a reason for him to
Well,
go after him.
I mean, as far as yeah, I was like, I could live with it, live without it in terms of that twist.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of the Boba Fett thing, it just raised too many questions. Like, no matter how valuable she is, you being a Jedi would be far more valuable. Why wouldn't Boba Fett try to take you on? Maybe he thought he couldn't. I don't know. Who knows? But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it just came off to me as an excuse to have a cameo.
Well, I will
Yeah.
agree with that, but I do think it was a pretty neat unexpected cameo. I
It's a
definitely did
cool
not
reward for
expect.
doing extra shit.
Right, right,
Yeah, yeah.
right. Okay, I think that covers most of the story and story content and characters. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before we talk about gameplay and some broader things with the game?
I guess the one cool thing about Z is that there was a piece of dialogue in the first mission that you do with her that she was like, "Oh, you're not dressed like a Jedi. Like they usually have robes." And then Cal's like, "I'm more of a cloak guy."
Or no, no, it was more of a poncho guy, right?
Poncho,
Yeah,
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 poncho,
yeah.
sorry.
That was
Yeah.
a good that was a good bit of dialogue. I do agree. Yeah, they're very well aware of. Talk a little bit metacontextually. They're very well aware of a lot of the criticisms and comments widely lobbed at Fallen Order.
Yeah.
Um, in that there's a pit in on Kobo somewhere where you can find and fight the spawn of Ogdo, which Ogdo Bogdo was a very reviled mini boss in Fallen Order that a lot of people hated. So they brought him back, and um, the reward for beating him, a chest behind him, is the one and only poncho you can get in this game. They kind of put all those references all in one.
I love that.
Unfortunately, when I was telling you guys that there's far worse designed fights than Vader or the Rancor, the spawn of Ogdo is the one. That fight is not fair.
Damn.
It is complete and total bullshit.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
not even just the boss fights, and I guess we're getting into gameplay. It's
Well,
just the
here's
combat encounters in general.
here's the reason I because this is my jumping off point to complaining about the combat. In Fallen Order, if you guys will recall, when you fight those big frog enemies on Zepho, um, their tongue when they would prepare the attack to spit out their tongue at you, there were a few things you could do
Yeah.
to and if that attack caught you, it wouldn't one hit kill you. It would do a good bit of damage to you, but it wouldn't one hit kill you, like it does in this game. Um, and the things that you could do where you could force pull the tongue and cut it off, or you could slow the enemy down and try to cut it off. You could do things to affect the fight to make sure that he couldn't use like that move again, and kind of make it a little easier on yourself. There were ways you could manipulate the enemy to your advantage. All of that is gone from this game.
Yeah.
You can't do any of that kind of shit. You do that fight against Spawn of Ogdo, you cannot cut off his tongue. You cannot pull his tongue. You cannot do anything to manipulate that fight. It is literally just when you find pot shots to take, when he's not doing undodgeable attacks, you take pot shots, and that is it.
And
That's
the
lame.
other thing I want to add, and I don't really remember the first game too well, but don't remember it feeling nearly as inconsistent with the combat rules and mechanics as this game is.
Well,
Like in a FromSoft game, all of the mechanics apply equally across almost. It's very rare in a FromSoft game that they break rules, and it's usually for like a boss for a very specific reason. But like here, just to use an example, there's a stagger meter, kind of similar to Sekiro. However, not even just bosses, like a bunch of the more powerful enemies, the stagger meter doesn't even really do anything. Like it just doesn't apply.
some of the bigger enemies, there's not really much of a way to stagger them. You're right.
Yeah, and with the Darth Vader fight, I was constantly trying to bust down the stagger meter as I was the rest of the game, and for other bosses as well. And I would do it, and it would like just take a tiny bit of health off. It wouldn't do anything mechanically in the actual fight. They wouldn't stop what they were doing.
In most cases, you'd get an opportunity to lay one or two hits on them unguarded, but that's about it. That's all it would really do.
But even that wasn't consistent. Like I know what you're talking about, and Darth Vader does do that. But sometimes you'll bust down his meter and nothing happens, and he all of a sudden breaks out into a one-hit kill strike that isn't telegraphed.
Which again would be fine considering who you're fighting against,
Right.
except you have to beat him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the problem.
But it also happens not one-hit kill shots, but like
right,
where like some of the bigger raider enemies, I'll bust down their thing, and all of a sudden there's untelegraphed attack. and you just have
Yeah,
to
that
like hope that it doesn't happen when you bust down their meter. Like,
and it's worse on Grandmaster. Like they
yeah,
literally have multiple unblockable attacks. They're more aggressive. The stagger meter doesn't really go down as much, and they one shot you. Like even those little freaking chickens that run and headbutt you, they kill you one shot
yeah.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Grandmaster. I
And
was just
Those
and
like,
things
what the
suck.
hell?
and it doesn't help that outside of boss fights, almost every encounter is like the definition of what they would call gank in the FromSoft community. Like they're just gank fights. Throw as much range shit at you while throwing as much melee shit at you, so
And
that you're just
that's
overwhelmed and
and
you can't mechanically deal with everything.
that's that leads into my next big problem with the combat is that the all the encounters, all of them are just completely unbalanced. They tried to have some semblance of depth with this game by just adding more options for you. They don't let you choose those options freely. You have to choose two stances at a rest point, and then you're stuck with those until the next rest point. And if you get into a combat situation where, hey, maybe some one of these other stances would be more conducive, well, too fucking bad. And even if you did have a stance that was more conducive, like you're getting bombarded with blaster shots at the same time that two dudes are trying to whack you with clubs. Your block button doesn't know whether to block and parry those dudes with the clubs or
Or
deflect
reflector
blaster
shots.
shots.
Yeah, yeah.
And you wind up no matter what you decide to do when you press the block button, the other thing is going to hurt you. That's going to
Yeah.
affect you.
Not
And
to mention the animation lock. So like there will be projectiles like rockets that you can't block, but you can use force things, but then you get animation locked. There's
yeah.
animation lock in the attacks, so you can't dodge out of them.
Hmm.
It's just it feels so janky. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, this game is the definition of jank. And
Yeah,
at the
when
end of the
you're
day, oh, go on to
no,
that.
I was just I didn't know you were I
All I was gonna say is at the end of the day, I just felt like I was jumping a lot because dodge was almost useless.
yeah.
Jumping a lot and fucking tapping square where I could, and hitting triangle because I started using the pistol because it's one of the best ways to get rid of ranged enemies that are
Yeah.
fucking harassing you. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say that like when you're fighting enemies one on one, like the bosses, like fighting Bode, fighting Dagon, even some of the like other stormtroopers that whatever the advanced ones are, um, those were fun fights like one on one or
hmm
even two on one. But when they started throwing hordes at you, that's when the gameplay
yeah,
kind of dipped for
The-
me. And even worse when you had to fight beasts, which sometimes you had to
Yeah.
fight beasts while fighting stormtroopers and shit like that.
yeah. I agree. The one-on-one fights still work relatively well, with the exception of things like we talked about with the Vader fight when the rules get broken and you don't really understand why.
Which
Yeah.
would have been
And
fine if you just died.
Yeah,
yeah, and like the whole reason for that, and the whole reason you bring up FromSoft, Jason, is because this game feels remarkably like From Software games combat. Um, it tries to emulate that pretty heavily, or at least the design. Um, but
but
and
there's
I
no
think it.
reason for it
Oh, I
at the
agree.
end
I
of the day.
agree.
Yeah,
And I feel like it did work much better in the first game because the encounters were more well balanced. You wouldn't have this huge mixture of differing enemy types. You'd have like a handful of similar ones, and the slow methodical gameplay that the game tries to encourage with its mechanics made a lot more sense. Now, it's kind of a mad dash to kill as many things as you can as quickly as you can before they kill you, and when it's a giant mixture of blaster type enemies and melee type enemies, it just doesn't work.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the
Um,
original, I only really remember at most tackling like 4 or 5 enemies at a time in terms of like foot soldiers and
I
whatnot.
mean, there could be more than that. The thing is, they would all be similar, right? Like you
Yeah,
could run into. I think there's like a few areas on Zepho where you could run into a room or run into an area, and there's like 10 stormtroopers, but they're all stormtroopers with
blasters.
blasters,
Yeah,
and you just deflect all their shots back at them, or you could use force powers to manipulate them, whatever you want to do. But like one of them might be a commander that's throwing grenades at you, and you could use those to your advantage too. It was fun, it was fair, and it was well designed and balanced. It's not here. It's a mess.
Yeah.
yeah.
um
Especially when you start getting like the droidicas that are just and any kind of ranged enemy that is continuously streaming shit at you while you're trying to just get to it through a horde of other enemies. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, I bring up they tried to have some semblance of depth by having like more stances. We went from I would say the first game we had 2.5 stances, right? We had single bladed, double bladed, and then there was that kind of middle
Yeah.
ground with the split saber where you could just do special moves with it, but it was never something you could actively have in combat. Here they make split saber its own stance, and they add, in my opinion, the two best stances in the game,
Oh yeah.
blaster and crossguard. Those were my two mains after I got them. I never
Same.
switched off.
I just
With
respect. I was like, put all my points into those two.
Was that the
Yeah.
same for you guys? What were your guys' main stances?
No, those two, yeah.
I
Like
only
said.
ever used the blaster once I got it.
You never used anything else?
Yeah, no. I just invested
Okay.
in
Yeah.
defensive shit, keeping myself alive, more health. Yeah.
Yeah. See, and I liked the balance because blaster was both range and quick, and then crossguard was very close range, very slow but very powerful. And those two move sets, interchanging them, worked really well for me, and I really enjoyed them. And it's not a it's kind of worth noting those are the two biggest new ones. Double bladed I do think was massively improved from the first game, but again, I just really liked blaster and crossguard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some of
But
those kill animations were really cool too. I want to give credit to that.
yeah, the kill animations, I think a lot of the combat animations, again, to bring up what Jason's already called this game, were really janky looking. Just
Well, because it will pull your character model over to the dead enemy to start the animation, especially when it's like you have a partner character and it's like a duo thing. So it will look weird. You kill an enemy and then try to run to the next one, but then suddenly your character model gets pulled back and goes into the animation. Yeah.
I just more so mean general combat animation. It's just like, because there's so much going on, and it's a frantic mad dash to kill everything that's in your path. It just doesn't look good, especially when you start getting hit with stuff and Cal's like, he goes to swing and he's like, and then he goes to swing and and it just keeps happening like that because you're just getting bombarded with shit. It's just, I don't know, the combat was just not fun.
Yeah, you don't even get to use some of the, like, I invested in like that quick draw thing for the blaster where you could like target 3 enemies and do it. And at no point do you ever get a chance, because it's got like even just basic force powers like force push or pull has like a charge up animation that you just don't get an opportunity to do any of the cooler stuff because the combat situations you're put in don't allow it.
Right. And it's not even like you on like like, again, they tried to introduce combat depth with these stances, but like none of the stances have a lot of depth to them. It's not like the progression for and this is kind of going into the progression system. Like there's a tree for every single stance. You can add like 2 to 3 moves that are basically like hold down square to do this or hold down triangle to do this, and then all the other skills after that are you do that thing but more effectively or faster, or it's stronger now. And that's just not very interesting. Like I don't want my current very, very small move set to be improved. I want new moves. I want new attacks instead of the same 3 combos that I can do with this single stance.
Yeah, again, that goes. I hate to keep making the comparison, but that's FromSoft is able to do that because in a FromSoft game, you have such a variety of weapons, and I have a feeling, like you said, they added the stances to try to compensate for that, to make it feel like they were different weapons completely.
And it could have worked. It really could have worked if there was just a little more to each one, but there really just isn't. And again, it would have worked better if you could have switched them on the fly rather than having to only have 2 at a time. Why wouldn't you have it just like be a radial wheel where it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing blaster, now I want to switch to single, now I want to switch to double. In any situation, I feel like that would have been such a better system, such a better improvement.
And I can't see a good reason not to. It's the same way
to artificially create challenge, I think.
Yeah, it's the same way.
That's the only reason I can think of.
It's the same way they kept in the souls, like if you die, you lose your shit. Like, why is that here? It's just frustrating, and it doesn't feel rewarding the same way because the game feels like it should be a linear action adventure game, but you kept the soul. It's a larger criticism I just have of the game as a whole, and we've said so many times already. You
Yeah,
shouldn't hate this game for what it's not, but like at the same time, it's like,
well, but the thing is, it's trying to create a semblance of challenge, right? And I genuinely appreciate that because that's the one big unique thing that video games have, right? They're a blending of all
yes,
these different mediums, but the one thing that no other entertainment medium has is challenge. And they're trying to artificially create that without actually putting in the work, right? They're putting in these systems where, like, oh, you can rest here, get all your stims back, heal yourself, but all the enemies respawn. And it's like, okay, but all the enemies are bullshit and they're not fun to fight against, and they're really
yeah.
frustrating, and they're going to kill you really quickly.
It's something other games have learned. When you try to do the Souls-like thing, you either do it all the way or don't. Because if you don't do it all the way, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
they want to have like the Uncharted style set pieces like they do in the game, but they also want to have the Souls-like stuff,
And like at the
and
end of
you
the
just
day,
can't do that.
at the end of the day, you're playing as a Jedi. That should be the coolest, most fun fucking thing to
Right.
do. And
The
frankly,
power fantasy.
I thought it was in Fallen Order. It was much better done in that game. It's here where
Yeah.
they try to make it more menacing, and it's like you can make it more menacing, but you have to put in the work to make it feel fun and fair. And I
It
don't think they
also
did that.
there's also a meta element where in the original game you're kind of a Padawan, so it makes sense
Yeah.
that you're repetitively, going through learning. Here, I would have preferred they just went all out action, adventure, power fantasy,
You know,
kind of like Force Unleashed back in the day, but not to that extent.
I think part of the problem though also is they don't want to change things up too much because they want this to feel like a cohesive trilogy of
Yeah,
games. So
and they want you to feel the power between Cal and Seer. So that's when we got our power fantasy was playing as Seer until
I
a
guess,
Vader came.
yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. For me, like I'm not gonna pretend like the idea of a Star Wars Souls like doesn't sound super cool because I feel
Oh
like
no,
if it's
definitely,
done
yeah.
right, like it would work really well. But the fact that when fighting certain enemies, it just feels so janky and like there's no way to like navigate it. Like you can't just go based on skills. Like it's just they make it kind of impossible. There's no iframes, there's nothing to study to get better. You just kind of got to get lucky that the animations don't lock you in,
I
and
was
that
under the
doesn't make a
impression
good
that there were
Souls game.
iframes for so
Yeah.
long until I actually went into an encounter and tested it, and it seemed like sometimes there were iframes, but most of the time there wasn't. I was getting hit, and it was like the same exact setup. I was like experimenting, trying to
No,
figure out the rules, but
I was literally on the other side of this like arena, and one of the like beast enemies magneted towards my character from like halfway across the arena.
that's another thing with unstoppable attacks. How monsters will spin in their models will spin in place. You think you
Yeah.
dodged it, but then the character just spins around and does the unstoppable on you anyway. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Um yeah. And I bring up just on top of the poorly designed enemy. Do you guys do many of the forced tears and stuff?
Nope.
A few of them, yeah.
Um not to keep bringing up Bogdo, but there is a forced tear. There's a forced tear where you have to fight two rancors at once.
Yes.
And if you thought that was bad, and I already told you guys how much worse Ogdo is than the Rancor, there's a force tear where you have to fight two Ogdo Bogdos at once.
Wow.
It's not fair. It's not fun. It's terrible. I beat it just by running away from them the whole time, blasting them with blaster stance when I could, and then one of the cross guard attacks you can use is jump and then press like the force button, and Cal will hit down on the ground with the lightsaber, and like a force energy beam thing will fire out forward, and that was how I beat them, was just
Yeah.
running away and using ranged attacks.
I think
Doesn't
I
that
mentioned
make you feel like such a cool Jedi, guys?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it earlier, but like I remember when Elden Ring came out and all the arguments about Millennia and that fight and the waterfowl dance. Waterfowl dance in retrospect feels more fair than like 95% of shit that happened to me in this game. And I
Yeah,
think
because
that's
at
at the
least
end of
when
the
you
day,
dodge, you have
yeah.
iframes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's telegraphed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
And
see
you
her
can learn
animation.
it, yeah, and it doesn't magnate you like Delilah was just talking about.
Yeah. For if you played Elden Ring, for more thoughts on that game, go listen to our
Yeah,
Elden
go.
Ring episode. I
Yeah,
think
where
to
we were
date,
all far more positive. Yes.
yeah, that's either our longest episode or our second longest episode. I can't remember which one is longer, that or Near Replicant. Um,
Yeah. Uh,
and go ahead, Delilah.
I was just gonna say another thing I didn't like about gameplay is like the constant shimmying through cracks to get from one arena to the next. I was just like
That's just
so
like
tired of that.
that's just yeah, that's a game that's a gaming in the 2020s thing.
Yeah.
I feel at this point.
The first thing I think of is Final Fantasy VII Remake, but yeah.
Oh, the
See, our
first thing I
episode-
think of is
Yeah.
God of War Ragnarok.
Well, that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just feel
like
like it was excessive in this one.
I feel like you could ask anybody like shimmying through a tight space. What's the first game you think of? And they would all have a different answer, and they all came out within the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah, there were a ton of them in this game, a ton.
Too many
Yeah.
though.
No, yeah, too many.
To get to
I'll
every
agree.
arena, you had to do that, like literally.
And like we got like the God of War devs, one of them chimed in about those, saying that it's not a loading screen, it's to lock you into an arena so that there's no escape. And like, yeah, I understand that, but make your fights more fun and
Yeah,
fair. And
especially if you're trying to be a Souls-like. Like part
Yeah.
of the strategy of a Souls-like is luring,
yeah,
you know?
Nobody's gonna get mad at you if you just put a giant mist wall behind you when you enter the arena. Yeah.
I guess that this is a good transition though into some of the locations and level designs. What did you guys think of the kind of the balance between, not the balance, but I feel like in the first in Fallen Order we had what, like 5 or 6 core planets to go to, and they were all relatively similar in size and scope.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think about that with this game?
You know, I didn't do too much of the side activities to really see how big planets were, but I felt like the way that they were explored in the main story made it seem like very linear despite it having an open world. Like as long as I didn't venture, it was fine for me,
Yeah.
like exploring the planets. But
Mhm.
if I platinum the game, I would have had more to say about that.
Yeah, okay.
I will
And
say
agree.
on the story segments, where you're exploring areas that the main story is taking you on, a lot of the traversal and exploration parts felt kind of bloated and too long, overly long, and I think a lot of it has to do. So people talk down on this and make fun of it nowadays, but climbing sections in an Uncharted game, Naughty Dog was smart to use that to generally give you time with dialogue, like characters would speak to each other as you're
Yeah.
traversing an area. Like those here would have been the perfect time to have characters have like actual meaningful conversations and fill in gaps like we were talking about earlier. But instead it's just silent as like you're climbing around for what feels like an hour doing nothing other than climbing.
Or it's like maybe a conversation with BD1, which is to say it's a fairly one-sided conversation because we can't
Right.
understand what BD is
Cal,
saying.
Cal
Oh.
reflecting on his current situation, yes.
Yeah,
Giving us some character exploration, yeah.
right.
Beatty, it's quick aside. Beatty had a lot more personality in this game, and I loved when there was that bow twist. He was like, he like screeched. I thought that was the cutest thing ever. But anyway, yeah.
I do think like obviously BD1 as a character like doesn't have much of an arc in any way, so it's not worth talking about BD1 much. But
But if he got destroyed, I would freaking rage.
right,
Yeah, he's a droid.
BD is a very good companion character. That I don't think anyone could reasonably hate, because how could you? He's so cute.
He's cute.
Yeah.
It's just
Delilah, do you have that Lego set?
No, I don't.
I kind of do want to get that one. That one's pretty cool.
I will
Yeah.
say it's just kind of annoying, probably more just because of the control scheme when you have to use his abilities that are tied to him and
Yeah.
switching between them. But I think that's more just a control thing and the way
Yeah,
it's laid out.
yeah. Well, you know what I think is like from a control perspective, what I think is ridiculous is bringing up The scope, how you like, I feel like the button combination just to bring up your scope is just so odd. You like press
Yes.
down on the D-pad to bring them up, and then you have to click a stick.
Yeah.
It
And,
just feels so strange.
and it feels weird when it locks you in. Like
Yeah.
you have to look at a few things. I'm like, I don't need to. I see it from here already. I hit circle trying to exit and it won't let me exit until I look at all the things.
Yeah. But again, I do genuinely like that most of Cal's up Metroid upgrades in this game are mechanical things related to BD1 versus like learning
Hmm.
new force powers and whatnot. I think because there's only so far we can go with that control scheme. I think they
Yeah.
were already kind of stretching their limits with this game where R1 kind of became a hub for like three different force powers, and
Right.
R2 and L2 were your push and pull.
Yeah.
Um so I
But
think branching out and giving upgrades that are more tangible was a smart idea. Go ahead,
I
Delana, sorry.
agree. And no, I was just to say, getting back to your question about like level design, I like how, and this is once again in terms of story, I like how the way you explored each planet was different.
Yeah.
Like in one planet you had these like weird bug things that will like drain your energy or whatever, so you had to like find ways to like stay above it. In Jeddah, um, they had that like sand lizard thingy. I don't know the
I
names, please
hated
forgive me.
I
There's too
hated
much
that thing.
lore. But like you know, you had to avoid that until you unlock the creature. And uh what was the other planet? Coruscant. I don't know, that was more like parkour kind of thing, which was cool because
Yeah.
it's a really cool looking planet. It's very neon
Parkour.
and yeah, parkour. So I do like that each like exploring each planet in story segments felt unique. But I feel like it in terms of exploration, I feel like it might just be boring to explore them
Well,
after the main story.
I think the bigger problem is just how like you go back to a lot of the planets in Fallen Order and you unlock like a new path in each one, but like there's more diversity in the planets and you're not like they kind of cycle through the ones that you're returning to, right?
Yeah, it felt like in the original, like as you go through the main story, you stay on a planet for a while. With this one, every time, because they have that open world aspect in the hub area, it's like, oh, I wonder where we're going next in the story. Three guesses. Oh, three guesses. It's Kobo.
Three guesses
Yeah,
because you only have three planets to pick from for most of the game.
yeah.
Yeah, going back to Kobo after every single thing you would do was just so dull.
It felt like each planet in the original was like its own part of the story, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't like this open world central hub, which is why I didn't do any of it because then none of it was in. And I mean,
And to be
yeah,
honest, it's not very interesting. Like it's not very like and we'll get into this more when we talk about collectibles, but like exploring still feels pretty good, but the rewards aren't good. They are not much better than they were in the first game. So like making Kobo this very vast planet that you wind up having to go back to like five different times for story purposes, but it has so many different side paths and so many different open places for you to explore. But like not it's not worth doing in my opinion. There's just not a whole lot there that is actually worth your time.
Most
And I
rewards
say
are
that because
cosmetic,
I
no?
most of them are, yeah. I mean, do we want to talk about collectibles right
Yeah, it's
now?
like they went from having like minimal cosmetics to like too many.
So in the first game, all of the collectibles were either ponchos or outfits for Cal or ship skins or BD1 skins or lightsaber parts. And the lightsaber parts don't do anything other than change the look of your lightsaber. Um there's no actual purpose to switch those parts to anything. They don't give any benefit or detriment. It's just cosmetic. In this game, there's all that stuff except for the ponchos. They trade the ponchos for different facial hair and different hairdos.
Yeah.
And oh, there's like a million different currencies you can get now. What can you spend the currencies on? Cosmetics.
Yeah. Or
um
music.
or music, yeah, like I lump that in with cosmetics to be
Yeah.
honest. And like there are some actual neat things that you can do with some of those currencies, like getting the bounty pucks for the doing the bounties that Cage gives you. You can unlock new blaster modes for your blaster.
Mhm.
There's 3 of those, and the rest of the rewards are cosmetic. You can
Yeah.
you'll unlock those within the first few bounties, and then everything else is cosmetic.
Mhm.
The I would argue the collectibles are worse now because they doubled down and just made the cosmetics that much more. There's
Yeah.
just it's just cosmetics but with extra steps now.
Yeah.
And
Freaking 5 different lightsaber pieces
yeah,
alone.
and they do add a system that I brought this up in our Fallen Order episode, and I stand by this. The best thing they could have done with the lightsaber parts, because again, customizing your lightsaber, cool. A lot of people really wanted to do that, but you can barely see it in the game, right? To me, there's hardly a point to customizing it. But if they actually tied some perks or something to getting those parts, it would make engaging
Which
with that more worthwhile.
they
Yeah.
did try to do. They do have perks, but they
Ex-
feel like they
but
have zero effect on the game.
and I think that's fine. I don't want them to affect it too much. And I think some of the perks are very good, and I did enjoy having that system added. It's just the fact that it's its own collectible. It's completely independent of the other collectibles.
Yeah.
So they kind of did what I was hoping they would do, but they didn't do it the way I wanted them to.
Which is really
And
weird because I mentioned this to you guys in chat as we were playing the game. I really liked what they did with Hogwarts, the Harry Potter game. But the thing is that game, like you said in our chat, Mark, that game has a gearing system. Like it's an RPG, it's an action RPG. Like all of the
yeah,
stuff you collect, it's just universal transmog. So even if something doesn't, help you out gameplay wise, you can use it. And it's also a self-made character, which is another point he brought up, which is like it's okay for Cal Kestis to just have a designated look because he is a character. He is Cal Kestis.
right. And he's portrayed by an actor
Yes.
that they use his likeness. Why am I allowed to give him the creepiest pedo mustache possible? Like,
Also,
if you're going to design a character, stick to that design. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Delilah.
well, I was gonna say also like seeing the reveal, the trailer reveal for this game before it came out, like seeing him with a beard just showed like, oh, he grew up and but you could shave it. Like, and make him look the way he looked in Fallen Order, like a kid.
Or give him an even bushier beard, or give him a
Right.
soul patch. He's your
Yeah.
Cal doll.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I kept him the way he was.
same. I didn't even change his clothes. If you're gonna design a character to have a certain look on the box of the game, stick to that look. That is a designed character. Someone put time and effort into that. Why would you let the player change that to the extent that you can?
Yeah, he's
Um,
so weird with like the hermit robe and stuff like that. It just
yeah.
didn't look right.
Yeah, it's and like you were bringing up, Jason, like with Hogwarts, it's a player made character, and that game is actively trying to be an RPG, and I don't want this game to be I mean, we've all heard my opinion on the RPGification of games. I don't want it. I don't want this game to be an RPG, but I feel like
Yeah.
they wanted the devs wanted it to kind of be to have some role playing elements, but didn't go all the way with it. And
I'm sorry. The way you just said that, like the first thing that came to mind was Game of Thrones. You could be King Jon Snow. I don't want it.
I don't want it.
You could have RPG aspects in every single video game ever. I
I
don't want
don't
it.
want it.
Yeah. I don't mind the cosmetics. I just feel like they needed to like
I
chill
mean,
out a little bit.
look,
A little less.
if you like playing with your Cal doll, that's fine. I just, I don't get the appeal. I think it takes away from the design of the character.
I agree.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
I agree, but
And
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said they didn't want to change the game too much.
right.
Um, which I feel like they should have changed it massively, and
There
it would
should
have
have
been
been
a
a
better
lot of
game.
there should have been a
Yeah,
lot of things changed from Fallen Order that weren't. Or they were changed and made for the worse, in my opinion. And it's so demoralizing when you find a cool secret, you find a cave, and there's a cool platforming puzzle. Again, exploring things, doing some of the platforming puzzles and challenges in this game are really fucking fun. And then you find a chest, and you open that chest, and
Color.
huh?
It has colors.
Yes.
Yeah, or like oh, you get a new facial hair design for Cal. It's like, why am I finding facial hair in a chest?
Yeah.
Or why is the map just flooded with these seed pods that like just get you new seeds
Music
in different
for
colors?
music for a hub you're never gonna want to spend time in. Yeah.
It's just useless busy work, and I don't know why. Like, you could have had so much cooler shit in this game that would have made like taking on those force tear challenges so much more meaningful, and it's just
I remember hearing somebody talk about this game on YouTube, and they said like they like tried to force Animal Crossing into this game, which like
yeah, they
why?
did. Because like in the first game, the gardening thing was there, but in the sense that you find a seed, Grease plants it, and then you wait, and that's it. Like, you don't actually have any active thing. It was just like a collectible that was a cheesy thing on your ship. It was hardly anything. Now there's like a whole garden that you can customize and plant all these different kinds of seeds and stuff. It's so dumb.
And
What
animals
made
that I
it
only rode when I had to for the main story. Like I was fast traveling everywhere else
Oh
around.
yeah, those animals were cute though. The little way they walked was so adorable. I loved it. But yeah, at least in the first game, like the collectibles of the plants, it was like, oh, they represented each planet that you visited, and it just felt
Hmm.
more meaningful. Like, oh, like I visited this planet, I got this seed that's exclusive to this planet. Whereas in this one, you just find seeds everywhere.
It's almost like a souvenir.
Yeah,
They were almost like souvenirs from the first. I actually never even thought about it that way. You're absolutely right, Delilah. Like,
yeah,
there were a handful of seeds you could find on each planet. This time, everything's on Kobo,
yeah.
and it's like things that don't even make sense to be on Kobo. It's like seeds that are in their names. It's even established, and in their colors, it's established that they're from they reign from different planets and stuff. And it's like, why
Yeah.
is all of this crap on Kobo?
It's like the height of irony because we all, well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I think we all would complain about the monetization of things as basic as cosmetics in games and how overdone it is. And when we
Yeah.
finally get a game that gives you all of the cosmetics through gameplay, there's no like satisfying underlying progression loop to
And I
justify like it's all just the cosmetics. If there had been some other kind of gameplay loop beneath it, some progression system that made you feel more powerful, made the encounters feel less shitty, then it might have felt somewhat worth it. But like you
I
said,
wouldn't
Mark,
complain still. Like I just feel like stop adding the fluff. You know what I mean? Just cut it out.
Yeah.
Like if it's not like a cool boss fight that's actually a cool boss fight, not one that's bullshit, then like that's worth exploring. If it's like something that benefits your character where it's not just like a piece of a lightsaber that gives you extra XP, which it doesn't do that anyway, but
Yeah.
even if
yeah,
it did do that, like it would still bother me. Like I don't want to have to go for these menial things. Like for that, like
defeat
just
defeat two rancors to unlock the goatee. Like
yeah, like I just there's too much fluff in games nowadays. Harry Potter suffered from the same thing. Jedi, like too many games are just doing this, and like when you're like us, like old disgruntled gamers that have played way too many games, it just feels like a waste of time.
oh,
Yeah.
gamer.
If I'm gonna do a cool thing or if I'm gonna find a cool secret, I want a cool reward to match that, and the rewards in this game are not cool.
Get your
Um,
hands off my action games. I do not need RPG elements.
Yes,
Old
please,
disgruntled gamer. It was a terrible
please.
old voice.
yeah. um, Trying to think if there was anything else about the design or levels that I wanted to talk about. There's really not much. I do think this game in particular showed a lot of love to certain Star Wars things, a lot of episode 1 love. By bringing back, well, I guess in general, episode 1 and 2, bringing back a lot of the battle droids and the droidicas,
Hmm.
the Lucre Hulk.
Yeah, it,
Um,
it tries to take advantage of the time frame it's set in to like
yeah,
make it like a trans and the first game did this too, to make it kind of like a
yeah,
transitional period between the Clone Wars.
yeah,
And there are some interesting things like whatever happened to all those massive armies of droids used by the CIS. And it's like, oh, they were kind of just taken by raiders. And yeah, it's cool, but like it's ultimately inconsequential.
yeah. And I think they I already brought up the hidden path, which was introduced in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like they try to reach for a lot of those newer properties, the newer stuff under Disney, and incorporate it in here. Jeddah being a planet, Jeddah is introduced in Rogue
I think
One.
actually I think Jeddah was before Rogue. Like they mentioned, they do. You're right. They
I
do
think I
mention it in
I
Rogue
think
One. I
no.
believe
You
Jeddah.
go to Jeddah in Rogue One, or they go to Jeddah in Rogue One. Like
No, no,
Jeddah is an
no,
actual location.
no. I mean, you're right. Yes, like Jeddah is in Rogue One, but I'm pretty sure Jeddah actually might actually go back to the old EU. I can't remember,
I
or it
thought
might
when
be a Clone
I
Wars. It might be a Clone Wars thing.
I
I know
thought when I looked into
it predates
this,
Rogue One. I think
I thought when I looked into it, it was introduced in Rogue One, but I could be wrong.
I might be
Um,
wrong as well.
yeah,
Again, indifference at this point.
yeah, I gotcha.
But I just think like generally the set pieces by themselves, like when they were intentional, like when you like have that moment where there's a sandstorm on Jeddah and then you had to like slide in like on your thing and you get separated by Marin and then there's this cool like sunset and so you see Cal all silhouetted and then you fight the AT-ST. I don't want to mess it up. AT-AT versus it was ST, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was a chicken walker.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, that was like a really cool sequence, and they had a lot of cool sequences like that in this story. But other than that, exploring the planets was like,
And there's also
This
just
game needed. Go ahead, Jason.
I was just gonna say there's also just a lot of over designing and packing in things that actually harmed the main story at some points, like when you have to chase Bode after the betrayal. I actually got lost in the Jeddah Temple archive place. I
oh
didn't.
yeah, I did too.
And I was just wandering around, like, where the fuck am I supposed to go? I had to look up which door I was supposed to go to because I was
Yeah,
just
because
running
he like
around the
runs away
spiral.
too fast.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
do.
but then after that, it was really cool when you get on
yes,
that
yes.
vehicle.
Yeah. I do think a lot of the like we complain enough about like the big open sections. I think a lot of the smaller, tighter like corridor levels where you're unlocking there's a lot of shortcuts in this game that you can unlock and I
Yeah,
really liked that. Like you do a
Yeah.
platforming puzzle and then you immediately unlock a shortcut so you don't have to do it again. And I really appreciated that because there wasn't a lot of that in the first game and you'd have to if when you went back to explore, you'd have to do a lot of that stuff again. It kind of becomes a little redundant
100%.
Yeah.
here like overloaded with shortcuts. A lot of the levels were very tightly designed and very considered, and I liked that a lot. That's an aspect of the game that I really appreciated. It's just it was all everything in between was there's a really big field that you have to run across and they give you mounts so that you can do it a little faster, and it's like why not have just tight level design
Yeah.
in the first place and
Hmm.
get rid of all this fluff.
Yep. That's
This
why
game
RE4 and Dead Space are great.
yeah, and in general, this game needed to be less or more like Uncharted and less like Banjo Kazooie with
Yeah.
just running around picking up shit.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, okay.
Yeah. How many times are we gonna say we can't hate the game for what it is? And yeah.
Yeah,
But
I know, and there's like I said, there's been a couple things that we brought up about that. It's just like the thing that gets me most is like this game has been like heavily praised and there's lots of things that people are calling out like oh this game is like better than Fallen Order and I'm like how there's just so much more crap and more doesn't necessarily mean better, it's just more busy work. I feel combat is worse and less focused. The plot's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it's
It's
a bad
I
sign when I actively dread playing the game. Like, and again, as I said earlier, like there were the story I enjoyed. Excuse me, for the most part. Wish it was fleshed out more. Could have been amazing, but it was good for what it was. But I dreaded playing the game in between, and that's a bad sign.
and again like you guys brought up already like where our perception of this game is kind of colored by our feelings about Star Wars at the time and right now like Delilah you brought up Star Wars is a little oversaturated and like I don't think that's coloring my perception of this game as much as it might be for you guys. But it definitely helped with Jedi Fallen Order coming out when it did, when the sequel trilogy wrapped up and was officially declared a raging shit show. That Fallen Order was kind of this triumphant product that came
right.
out and was like, no, Star Wars can be really cool. This is proof of that. Star Wars can be good again, and that game just came out at the right time and hit the right notes. Had some flaws, but like was still a really cool single player Star Wars experience, something we hadn't gotten in a long time at that point. And this one as a follow-up just doesn't feel like the improvement that I wanted it to be. And
Uh,
that's where my disappointment comes. I am disappointed immensely in this game, and I feel like it could have been
Same.
this really great sequel, and it did not work in many fundamental ways.
Same, because I was actually anticipating this game to some degree. I was looking forward to it, and
Yeah.
I walked away with the same feeling of disappointment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it felt rushed. I felt like they could have used more time in the oven, and I definitely liked some aspects of this game more than Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
I do think the one-on-one combat with like not beasts were actually better. And I think having the extra stances was part of that, and the cool death animations. But overall, I do think that Jedi Fallen Order was like a tighter package, although it still had some elements that weren't as tight. And I felt like it went from like not being as tight to being too much, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like they could have
Exactly.
tightened it more from what Jedi Fallen Order was rather than expand.
Yeah. Or at least like if you're gonna expand the right things. Don't just take an entire more is better approach, which is kind of what they did, I feel, with this game.
Yeah.
Then and you bring up the last major thing I want to talk about, which is like, you know, granted, who knows? This game could get like 5 more patches and run like absolute silky smooth perfection. As of the time that we're recording this game is still really buggy on like pretty much every platform it's launched on.
Like they just released a patch to actually finish quest lines. Yeah.
Oh no, they haven't released that yet. That's like
Oh,
that's like
okay.
in pre-release. I think they're doing some bug testing before that patch goes out. I described the bounty quest line where Boba Fett shows up at the end. Yeah, we all watched that on YouTube. The reason being is, first of all, Jason and Delilah, you guys didn't want to fuck with most of the side content in this game, which I
I
don't
just want to
blame you
play
for.
Zelda, to be honest.
Yeah.
I 100%ed this game against my better judgment, and well, except I didn't 100% it because the bounty quest line is bugged, and
Yeah.
I can't get any more bounties to finish it.
Yeah.
It has been bugged since launch. People have been complaining about this since launch, and it still has not been patched or fixed.
Mhm.
The
Your
only
your
workaround that I can, what?
I was just gonna say your mindset regarding trophies is very applicable to this game. Like I said before,
Yeah.
you spend enough time fighting demons, you become one. You spend enough time seeking trophies, you become one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I cannot platinum this game right now because I can't finish the bounty quest line, and um, it's just really frustrating and really annoying. And they've known about this since the reports started coming in. They've been working on a patch, and I'm sure, you know, I don't want to be harsh to the devs. I don't want to. And at the end of the day, this isn't Respawn's fault. This isn't the devs' fault. This is EA's fault, who wanted to get this game out, probably wouldn't give them more time, and they had to put it out in this state. And I feel mostly bad for the PC players because PC at launch, this game was borderline unplayable, and I think
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's gotten into a playable state since, but it's still
I
just a
think.
mess.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why like the talk of the game died down so quickly, like within a week.
Because a
Because
lot of
I
people
saw videos of major streamers who were all playing on PC, like Asmongold just quit the game like a few hours in, like same with a bunch of other big streamers.
a lot of people that are playing on PC are just there's two things. They want the game to be a little more playable, so they put it on they put it on the back burner and say when it gets patched, I'll play it. And then yeah, the other unfortunate thing is that Tears of the Kingdom came out 2 weeks later, and
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah,
immediately was like, they were Andy and Toy Story. I don't want to play
Yeah.
with you anymore.
And
And
now
dropped.
Diablo's out, and then
Yeah.
after this Final
and
Fantasy.
Yoshi P is just sitting in the background with Final Fantasy, like good. He's just looking like he's just you fucking idiots. You released it at the same time as Zelda.
And you know what? Like, to bring up Final Fantasy 16, not just because Jason and I are massive not just Final Fantasy fans, but I think it's safe to say Naoki Yoshida fans.
Oh yeah,
After
Yoshi P. I have an altar of him right next to
yeah,
the Mother Mary is Yoshi P.
there's been a lot of talk with the previews for Final Fantasy 16 that the game was basically finished a year ago. The last
Oh yeah, bro.
year, the last year has been all on polish, to the point where they have publicly said, and hopefully I don't eat crow on this, or hopefully this isn't a disastrous launch for that game. But they've said that they don't plan to have a day one patch for Final Fantasy 16. That's how
Nice.
confident they are in that game.
Let's go.
Uh, Jedi Survivor has had 5 patches and it's still a mess.
Yeah.
The cutscenes are like 10 to 15 frames lower than run at 10 to 15
Oh
frames
god,
lower than
those
the
freaking
gameplay does.
transitions were terrible. So
Even
jarring.
and this is on console, not even on PC. Like I'm talking
Right.
about on PS5, the frame rate is terribly inconsistent.
Stuttering too during like combat or traversal was really bad.
Katie can't even watch me play it.
Damn.
She like during actual gameplay, she says that like just looking at it for 5 seconds or so makes her feel sick.
Aw.
It's not consistent. It's not a good situation. And I really hope they can turn
Yeah.
it around because this game is just buggy as all hell.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of all I really have to say. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before the final question?
No, it's just
Nope.
overall, I did have fun with the game. I have criticisms, but I did enjoy it, and I felt like it could have been even better if they tightened it up and waited to release it.
Yeah. Kind of a rare negative episode, I feel. I feel like we don't usually go all of us like go all out with a lot of negative criticisms and stuff.
It's more sad because, as I said before, like the bones of an amazing story is there. Not just the
Yeah.
bones, even like a lot of great scenes, and I was enjoying it for. I was really into the story, just the story, not the game. Which for like 75 to 80% of the story, I was there. But
Yeah.
It had some really cool set pieces. Like I
yeah,
really got to give that game credit for the set pieces that they had. So awesome.
Yeah. All right, are we ready for the final question?
let's go.
I guess just I just want to talk about the fact that this Stig Asmussen has gone and said in interviews that they always envisioned this as being a trilogy. So I think it's all but confirmed that we're getting a third game to finish this trilogy out. What do you guys? Let's. I think it's pretty clear what we want to see from gameplay, from design. But story-wise, what do you guys kind of want to see to wrap up this trilogy? Do you got any hot
Just
predictions to lay out there?
I feel like I talked a little bit about what they're probably gonna do with like, Kata being his Padawan and stuff like that. I would just love to at this point like Cal go deep into like the dark realm
Like I
and
said before, yeah, that's
and
why I wanted my
we still
perfect ending
play
for
as
here.
him.
Yeah, my perfect ending here would have been if Bode had offered peace terms and wanted to just settle it amicably, and Cal, you just kill him
Because
and go
they
off.
have to do something with the
Because
embrace the darkness at the end, because it
yeah,
didn't go anywhere here.
it
You know what I
feels like
mean?
everything resolved at the end of this, so it's like, what next? It's not like Empire where you're left on a cliffhanger and the character arcs aren't resolved. In fact, the character arcs are built up more to a place where you want to see where it's going to end. Here, I don't know. It seems like all the major arcs resolved.
It's
So at
worth
this point, it's like as long as Cal dies, honestly, the Night Sister too, having the Night Sister, but like I just as long as the Jedis are die, I don't know what else like
Ooh,
I could
what if
want out
we
of.
played as Marin, like, and we had to like fight Cal? That would be pretty cool.
I feel like that's too subversive of a thing for this team in this game to do, but that would be cool. Like,
Yeah, I
Well,
would
it
love
would
to
have been
play as Marin.
it would have been
yeah,
cool if it was set up, but again, here they kind of just
yeah.
resolved the whole dark side thing.
It is worth noting that the thing that Seer says at the end of the game, maybe this is something we probably should have brought up, is like, and it's kind of questionable how this was done because Seer, as far as we can tell, doesn't become a Force ghost. So she somehow tells Cal at the end of the game during the funeral, guide her through the darkness. Not that you would believe Kata is in a dark state at all because she's the cheeriest 6 or 7 year old girl you could possibly meet in Star Wars in the post game. But that's what Seer says. So
Could have
Could
also
it
just been
be?
referring to the general nature of the galaxy at that point, but who knows? Yeah, you're right. Like,
Yeah. Not like, could they be setting up a Kratos and Atreus type thing where Cal needs to raise a child and keep the child's anger in check while also keeping his own in check? I would prefer to see Cal go lean full on into the dark side and wind up. Obviously, I think. Can we all be in agreement that Cal needs to die by the end of the next game?
yeah, I've said it multiple times. That's why I stated it so
Well,
early. I was glad. Oh,
Delilah, what are
sorry.
your thoughts on that?
Um, yes, but it would have to be someone important that kills him. Like
Yeah,
it would
yeah,
have to be
yeah.
Marin, I think,
I agree with
or
that.
Kata, but I don't feel connected to Kata for me to say that just yet. Like they would
I
have to flesh
just
her out in the
I
next
just
game.
feel weird about it at this point because it looked like they were setting it up with this game and then just resolved that conflict here.
Or alternatively, what if they do a Halo Reach or Crisis Core thing where it's Cal versus like like several legions of stormtroopers, and he just gets overwhelmed?
Hmm.
I mean, it all depends on what this because from here it's like the next story it's going to be its own thing
Yeah.
with loose connections to this. So like because
Well,
Tanalor, okay, it's just a place. I guess you hide
well,
there.
I think we need to go off the assumption that Cal is going to go through with getting the hidden path there, raising an army, and taking the fight to the Empire. I think that is bound to happen because that's what he wants. That's what he envisioned for finding Tanalor.
Again, this is why I said earlier, like it felt like the game should have ended after the whole everything that happened on Jeddah, and then left Bode as like the path of vengeance for Cal in the next game. But
Yeah,
it
well,
is what it is.
yeah, it is what it is. But I guess, yeah, we can at least agree that Cal probably has to be gone by the end of the next game
Any
because,
Force user,
yeah,
like if Kata is a Force user, like
and
it feels dark.
I agree with that because it definitely is a problem where that more and first of all, too many things keep coming out that take place between the prequels and the original trilogy. And then the more Force users, the more Jedi that they bring in that survived the purge. It's kind of diminishing the impact of the purge.
Right.
Right. Say what
Right.
you will about the prequels, but the execution of Order 66 was a very big deal. It was a very emotional moment for those movies and for this franchise. And it becomes more and more diminished every time Disney decides to say, hey, this person survived. Hey,
And it
this Jedi exists.
and not for nothing, but it diminishes the importance of Luke's journey in the original because
Yeah.
he's our last hope. No, there's another. That's like a big drop, but like, no, it actually turns out Ahsoka Tano's over here,
Didn't have
Kane's
to
over
be.
there.
Yeah.
Or no,
But
Kane dies. I think. I don't remember.
yeah, it's not no, there's another. It's no, there's another or another and another. There's a few
Yeah,
choices we have, Obi-Wan. Don't worry about it.
yeah, exactly.
Um okay. And anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap this bad boy up?
No, no.
All
Mm-mm.
right. Jason, what is the Kwasnicki rating?
It's like the story carried this. If I just think of it as a game, I want to give it sub 5, just because I think it's a bad game. But I guess the story. I'll be
It's
nice. I'll
not
give
a
it a
bad
5.
game.
I'll give it a 5. It's average. The story
Okay.
carries it.
5
But
what?
5 Kobo seeds, whatever. I don't know, or whatever the shard,
Damn.
Okay.
whatever the fucking shards you collect. I don't know.
I can't remember what they're called. I forgot already.
They're basically supposed to be Titanite shards, except there's nothing to upgrade, so you use them on cosmetics.
Yeah. The upgrades are a poof for your hair or a ponytail. I don't know. I don't remember the hairstyles you could get. The only
Yeah,
time I changed Cal's look was for
defeat
trophies, so
defeat Darth Vader without dying on Grandmaster and get dreadlocks.
Delilah, do you have anything to plug? Anything you
No,
want to plug now?
I quit everything. Sometimes I post YouTube stuff. I posted my reaction to like the big twists in this game and the ending, but
Man, we're
yeah.
becoming so boring, guys. All we do is this show.
Fucking work, dude. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I know.
You
It's
guys gotta bring us up. You gotta make us successful so we could just do this and
right.
more.
Like, come on,
Uh,
guys. You know, if you like Reap the Spoils, if you like this show, if you like us, gotta share that show, man. If you listen on YouTube, thank you. Really appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not. Give this episode a thumbs up. And share the show with whomever you think would enjoy us complaining about Jedi Survivor for over 2 hours. Leave us a comment. Tell us your thoughts on the game. If you liked it and you hate everything we just said, let us know. I'm open to the discussion. I've had this discussion with a few friends of mine already. Friends that liked this game way more than I did, and we've been civil. We've talked about it. We've talked it through. One of those friends
I like
probably
the
going to
game
listen to
too.
the show.
I
Yeah,
liked it
oh
too.
yeah, that's fair. And
Doesn't mean I can't be critical of it though.
right. If you love something, you got to criticize it, and that's just like the mantra for Star Wars in this day and age, in my
Mm.
opinion.
The more you
If you
hate it,
listen,
the more you actually love it. The bigger the fan you are.
well, it's an indicator of passion, but again, as I said,
yeah,
I had that passion even when it was bad, and I've been through the 5 stages of grief. I just
yeah,
watched the original trilogy, and that's pretty much it.
yeah. Like I said, denying that J.J. Abrams is involved. All right, I won't go through that whole thing again. If you listened on Apple Podcasts, thank you. Please rate and review the show. 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like in the review. And make sure you share the show with your friends, your family, your pets, your kids, whomever. Probably not your kids. We say bad words a lot. I'm not even gonna bring up. I mean, follow Delilah because she's the most active out of the three of us. But like, I just find Twitter too depressing to be on for more than 5 seconds anymore. So follow Delilah at Assassina_san. And
I just tweet and respond to my tweets. I don't even look at other
yeah.
people's tweets.
If you really want to follow me, you can follow me at Nibblehymie, and I hardly look at it anymore. And you can follow Jason at SolidQuaz, but outright don't follow him. He forgets what Twitter is every day.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's hey Delilah, what's the next game we're doing an episode on?
It's a video game TV show called The Last of Us.
What? We're not covering a video game next?
No, just
That's
one of the
crazy.
most successful
We'll
video game.
inevitably start talking about a video game, but yeah.
Well,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
of
for
course,
sure.
but
So
yeah,
basically, spoilers for The Last of Us and the potentially parts of The Last of Us Part
Which
2.
I would recommend. I've yet to watch this. You guys both have already watched the show, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't actually watched the show, so I'll be binging it, and I'm interested because I've heard such a range of things about it.
Yeah.
But I would recommend, and this isn't just a shame plug, but if you're going to listen to what our thoughts were on the show, go see what our thoughts were on both games, because those are interesting discussions that will probably, I imagine, have impact on how we view the show, or at least I view the show.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're breaking out of our comfort zone a little bit here, talking about a just a fully viewable, watchable product instead of one that actually has gameplay. So this will be an interesting experiment. It's something, if it goes well, maybe we'll do it again in the future, because as we're seeing today in 2023, video game adaptations are becoming hotter and frankly better than they ever were before,
Yeah.
which I think
Doesn't
is,
say much though.
yeah, the bar was set really low.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting. So yeah, look out for that next episode. We'll be talking about HBO's The Last of Us season 1. It definitely would help if you listen to our episode on the first Last of Us game. I don't think we'll go much into The Last of Us Part 2.
I think it's irrelevant because of, well, again, I haven't seen the show, but I'm
It
assuming
Yeah,
there are
has certain
aspects of the show.
setups, but
yeah,
we
there
don't
will
have
be
to,
there
like-
will be some relevancy. So if you have played that game, if you can play that game, if you can listen to our episode for Last of Us Part 2 as well, I would definitely suggest it. I mean, I suggest it because I'm pretty proud of our show, and I think we put out a good listenable product. So if you just want to give us some more support, go listen to those episodes before HBO's The Last of Us episode.
Yes.
And yeah, that's it. Look out for that. And thanks for listening.
Delilah, were you saying something? Oh, may the force be with you all.